In Town Board, we are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October 4th work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please, where is Carol? We don't have the clerk.
Here she comes.
Here she comes. We'll wait for the clerk to join us and do the roll call. It's a good day for a cup of tea. Carol, if you'd please read the roll call.
Present.
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 Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today's work session will begin with a public portion where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. That will be followed by bids presented by Purchasing Department, Police Belchick, the 2023 tentative budget, proposed code changes for accessory apartments, the request for no parking on Flamingo Road, Highway Department request for stop signs, followed by liaison reports, and we do have a few resolutions today. I have a sign-up sheet in which I have 4 members signed up. I'll take those first, and then we'll go to the phones for callers and anyone else in the audience who's not signed up. I'll take by show of hands. John Stoner.
Hi all, I'm John Stoner, a longtime Wainscott resident and a member of our newly formed in July 501c3, the Wainscott Heritage Project. Dear Supervisor Van Scoyoc and members of the East Hampton Town Board, the Wainscott Heritage Project continues to be encouraged by recent discussions and announcements regarding historical preservation efforts in East Hampton. We appreciate that Supervisor Van Scoyoc and Councilwoman Overby have expressed strong support for the town historic preservation projects and are grateful that board members share this interest in preserving East Hampton's significant history and character. We understand there is the intention to update historic resource surveys that led to the designation of 4 historic districts in town: the Montauk Association, Springs, Amagansett, and Bluff Road. Best practices in preservation recommend these surveys be updated at least every 5 years, and it appears ours have not yet been updated since the early 2000s. Included in the 2023 tentative budget is $30,000 that would cover the completion of surveys for Springs and Wainscott. We want to express our full support of this proposed expenditure. These surveys are necessary and useful tools for town and hamlet planning and help guide that planning process, management of both public and privately owned historic sites. Of particular interest to our organization is the update to the Wainscott Historical Resource Study, originally conducted in 1990, which is therefore many years out of date. While that survey did not lead to the local designation of an historic district, thankfully, most of the cultural resources included in that proposed district continue to exist. An updated survey will conform or identify more historic properties and determine their integrity and potential historic significance. We believe it will expand the originally proposed boundaries to include potentially significant buildings excluded in the past, in some cases because structures that were not eligible then may now qualify for historic designation because of the over 3 decades that have passed since 1990. We are fully in favor of this appropriation of monies and encourage the board to approve it in order to ensure this critically strategic exercise will be completed in 23, thus helping to define and preserve the enduring historic character of East Hampton Town and its 5 hamlets. Respectfully, the Wainscott Heritage Project, Esperanza Leon, Carolyn Logan Gluck, Susan Macy, Pam Mahoney, Bruce Wayne Solomon, and me, John Stoner.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Jane Marin. Morning, Jane.
Good morning, Jane Marin from Amagansett. Mr. Supervisor, members of the board, good morning. As I've done numerous times before, I'm here today to offer comments about development, or more specifically, overdevelopment. So what else is new? Over the last year or so, I've addressed you all on many topics, including affordable community housing, coastal resiliency, land preservation, the CPF, protecting woodlands, addressing clearing activity, water quality, and beach access, protecting beach access. Though these topics vary, as you may have noticed, my concern about overdevelopment has been an ever-present and defining leitmotif of my commentary. As such, some may regard me as a bit of a one-hit wonder, but my repetitive focus is because I see overdevelopment as a common element, if not the root cause of those issues and many of the other tough challenges we face as a town. Though I am back here today with my vocal stylings to reprise my favorite song, it strikes me that recently the context has shifted materially. Two very important people, both here in the room today, have gone on record stating a willingness to relook and rethink specific elements of our town zoning code. I note Jeremy Samuelson's words in the New York Times article a few weeks ago about ditch plains, quote, "If we are not satisfied with what current code allows, then we should work together to come up with amendments to the code that align with our shared values." Harmonizing with that, Mr. Supervisor, your recent words in the Star really resonated with me. In particular, so important is your identification that many people are now building all the way to the maximum allowances, when in the past, far fewer approached the upper limits because they were more attuned to scale and compatibility with the community. In particular, you indicated it's time to relook at code provisions, including coverage and clearing. All in my opinion, our venerable zoning code now seems underpowered relative to current dynamics. To that end today, I would like to offer a few direct requests. Number one, I ask you formally to launch a public process of rethinking and amending the code, including all the dimensional allowances of GFA, building and lot coverages, setbacks, height, and clearing ratios. Number two, as part of that, I ask you to establish a code action working group comprised of senior town officials, as well as a small number of analytical and creative citizens. Number three, to set realistic but urgent calendar goal to get to town board work sessions and public hearings on proposed changes. Four, to strongly consider a pause, I won't use the dreaded M word, and around the most aggressive type of building and development, both residential and commercial. And number five, begin as soon as possible some regular public reporting of key building and land use data. To conclude, as we watch developers disrespecting and dismantling much of what we love about this place and most everything that supports quality of life, many of us are realizing this extractive activity yields extraordinary profits for a few, but undermines sustainable value for the rest of us. My hope is that you ensure that what is actually happening in and on the ground as a result of Chapter 255 becomes fully consistent with the purpose and intent of the code that is stated so beautifully in 255-111, the vision and goals laid out in our comprehensive plan, and our most important imperatives of affordable community housing, natural resources, and quality of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. And we don't consider you a one-hit wonder. Leonard Green. Good morning, Leonard.
Good morning, and thank you for taking the time to hear what I have to say. I'll try to keep it brief. As it is, apparently, it's perfectly all right to overclear a building lot, to remove all the native vegetation and replace it with sod, leland cypress, and invasive grasses, as long as you're not in a special protected district. Drive around town and you see this again and again, bare, clear-cut lots, either for new construction or renovation. If this were only an aesthetic issue, it would be bad enough, but it isn't. There are many hidden environmental issues at stake. When we clear lots, we shut down important environmental services provided by indigenous plant communities. When we replace the native vegetation with most popular exotic ornamentals, we do not replace those lost services. Done again and again, the cumulative consequences are profoundly detrimental. In other words, it all adds up. What services am I talking about? First, when we remove native trees, shrubs, and grasses, we destroy the habitat they provide above ground for birds, mammals, reptiles, and insects. Habitat loss is a prime cause for the precipitous species decline we are facing. Just consider insects. Without pollinators, not only do we lose essential agricultural crops, we lose all flowering plants. That's all flowering plants. This is not about aesthetics. It is about our survival. We can't live without them. When we remove ground vegetation, we disrupt the soil biome, perhaps the most diverse ecosystem on the planet. A healthy gram of soil has as many as 50,000 microorganisms. A cup of healthy soil contains more cellular life than people on Earth. These, along with root fungi, keep the planet breathing. They sequester more carbon than all the plants in the world, and they keep the soil alive. They keep the soil alive, preventing runoff while filtering and retaining water, something vitally important as we suffer increasingly aberrant rain patterns. So what's to be done? We need code reform. I would suggest we limit clearance and excavation to what's necessary for construction. I also suggest that we require native revegetation with reasonable accommodations for turf and ornamentals. All right, so I just like to say that, just driving around this summer, I was shocked to see so many lots just clear cut for not even construction, just renovation of a house. And I don't think we think about seriously enough about the damage this does to the environment, especially that part of the environment we don't see. There's so much going on underground that provides so much for us in terms of water quality, in terms of just carbon sequestration, in terms of keeping the earth cool and providing respiration that, well, I think I've made this point. So I'd just like you to think about that. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Leonard. Roxanne Pintu. Hope I said that right.
Good morning. Okay, I'm going to be brief today. I'm here again to talk about the danger posed by Maidstone Gun Club to me, my loved ones, and my neighbors, and everyone walking through the state park woods. I know you received my video of the shot fire from the club that hit my house on August 5th. And I'm here today. I wanted to show the footage, but I was not allowed. I was told no. Okay. I support people's rights to have guns, but what I don't support is for a gun club to operate in a dense, highly populated area that has managed for the past 18 years to shoot people's homes. Wainscott citizens are not safe. The mile-long gun range is pointing directly at our homes, only a few hundred yards away from our homes. The Maidstone Club was relocated once before to this area because of the same reasons. People's safety and our properties must be the number one concern of the town board. Okay. And the other issues which you all know, the lead that's poisoning our water, the trees that are being removed, the birds, and the animals do not live near or inside of the gun club. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to speak? If not, I'll go to the phone lines. Jason, do we have any callers on the line?
Yes, we do, and I am unmuting our first caller right now. Hold up 1 second. Okay, and hello, caller ending 8908. You are on the air. Hello.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. My name is Ellen Corwin. I'm a resident of Wainscott. I just wanted to bring to your attention that, Roxanne Pintilli just presented. And I have to say, it is an absolute miracle that so far no one has been injured or shot or killed by errant bullets. Her video is chilling. I suggest you see it. I am absolutely terrified for my granddaughter. We were thinking this summer about putting up a play set for her in the backyard, and we've scratched that idea. I worry about her safety, my safety, any children that come into our yard. I will not allow them to play back there. I just want you to do the right thing, and please realize that this club is dangerous, and I feel it does not present any public benefit to the residents of East Hampton. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Jason, if you could go to the next caller, please.
Unmuting now. Caller ending 7024. You're on the air. Hello.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Hello? Oh, thank you. My name is Lori Weinstein. I live on Merchants Path in Wainscott. I'm another person who's going to speak to you just briefly about the danger to our safety and my neighbor's safety posed by the rifle bullets coming from the Maidstone Gun Club. You know, our homes have been hit by bullets, and the latest incident was Roxana's on this past August 5th. I, too, have no objection to gun clubs, but I do have an objection to a club that is in such close proximity to our homes and the public walking trail, and whose rifle range points directly at our homes, and where bullets have already hit our homes. Years ago, the club was relocated to its current site, where it was determined from the prior site that the community had grown and the site didn't work anymore. Maybe it's time to reconsider the current site of the club, as our community has grown and bullets from the club are hitting our homes. I know we can find a solution, and I ask, please, how can we live with ourselves if the next bullet shot from the Maidstone Gun Club hits a person working on the trail or sitting in their backyard? Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for calling, Lori.
Okay, going on to next caller. Hello, caller ending 8764. You're on the air.
Good morning, and thank you. This is David Buddha. Since the board has thankfully continued to publish in advance materials concerning your work sessions, and today you have, yesterday you have published the 2023 tentative budget, I had an opportunity to quickly scan sections of it, and I'd like to offer a couple of brief comments and or suggested corrections. However, before I do that, I want to just digress based on the earlier speakers before you in person today. I believe that the gentleman from the Wainscott Heritage Foundation and Jane Marin forgot to advise you and the public of the presentation they're putting on Saturday of a fabulous, what looks like a fabulous movie called One Big House, which apparently is going to be a documentary about the overdevelopment of Martha's Vineyard. It's something that you should all be concerned at, and I hope you all will attend. I would also like to, since she's much more eloquent and tactful than I am, I'd like to make an early nomination of Jane Marin as East Hampton Citizen of the Year. She's doing a fabulous job, and I 100% agree with her comments today. If you actually look at some of the development that's going on, it's frightening what can be done when a developer maximizes development and clearing. Let's get back to the budget. While skimming through the tentative 2023 budget, I quickly noticed two factual errors that should be corrected. In the supervisor's budget message and in the impact of tax change section of the budget comparison schedule, reference is made to property market values based on certain specified assessed values. The tentative budget needs to update and correct those values by using the 2022 state calculated equalization rate for East Hampton Town, which was finalized on September the 7th at 0.45% level of assessment, which is the same value as the townwide 2022 residential assessment ratio, which was published on February 28th. The tentative budget has mistakenly used the 2021 equalization rate of 0.58. Next, the organization chart for the Zoning Board of Appeals carries forward a prior budget error of listing the planning director at the top above the chairperson of the ZBA. The town planning department head should not be included in that organization chart at all. Compare the ZBA organization chart with the planning board organization chart. Also, although I know you will disagree, in my opinion, it is incorrect to describe a 5.6% spending increase of $4.8 million over the 2022 budget and a 7.5% increase of $3.9 million in salaries and employee benefits as being only a small increase. To my way of thinking, that should be termed a significant one-year increase. I also suggest you consider changing the name of the section of the budget denominated as the Town Board. The more correct label would be Town Council, since it only concerns the activities and staff of the 4 Town Council members. Lastly, since health insurance expenses are projected to be $12 million, and that is far and away the largest component of employee benefits, I request that somewhere in the budget you provide a breakdown of the medical expenses for active employees versus retirees, and that you also include a breakdown of the amounts of additional medical expense costs that are contributed by both active employees and retirees. I note in the pie chart that for this year and also last year, you have netted out the contributions by the employees, so it understates the total cost of health insurance by the amounts that are contributed, and therefore also makes it difficult to understand what portion of the Cadillac of medical benefits, as it's been described, what percentage of those benefits, both for active employees and retirees, are contributed by them. Thank you very much. I know I ran over my 3 minutes, but thank you very much.
Thank you, David. We'll have a look at those various things you pointed out.
Okay, unmuting next caller. Hello, caller ending 4549. You're on the air.
Good morning. My name is Christina DeSanti. My husband Rudy and I are local small business owners. We are the parents to 2 20-somethings that may want the opportunity to come back after college and raise their own families here. We are caretakers to an elderly family member. We are the sandwich generation. At 52 years old, the vast majority of our peers that we grew up with have left East Hampton or have plans to leave. It is even worse for my children's peers. I'm calling today to express our support for some of the changes that are being considered for accessory dwelling units, which would allow relaxing of the guidelines for ADUs. This is one vital piece of the affordable housing puzzle to stem the tide of middle class fleeing this town. Our critical infrastructure at this point is seriously at risk. So I want to put a face to this, my personal example. We are on a lot a little bit under the 3/4 acre that is currently required to build an apartment with a kitchen. I know you're considering going to a 1/2 acre at least. I would encourage you, for the people in Springs who are on just under 1/2 acre, to maybe consider going even a little bit smaller than that. In my example, we would use an apartment for one of our adult children once they graduate college. We might at one point use it for the parent that we are taking care of, because at some point that may become necessary. At some point, we may flip and let one of our children live in the main house and take the apartment as we ourselves get older. Should we have no need for it for a family, we would be the people that would be renting to a teacher or a police officer or any other locally employed person or couple to generate an income stream. Many, many of my peers are in a similar situation and are watching this development carefully. Make no mistake, currently these apartments exist illegally all throughout the town, and people are overcharging. So changing this and having some regulations in place will actually help control all of these illegal rentals. Many of my peers rent their own homes for the summer and move in with family, or they use that as an opportunity to take an extended vacation. So instead of renting your own home for a summer to make ends meet, many would now have a year-round rental income instead to offset their costs, and at the same time be providing workforce housing for their community. So I would encourage you to take a look. I think the 3/4 acre is too extreme. I know that you want to expand the number of units that you will allow and perhaps go to at least a half an acre, perhaps even lower. I know a lot of Springs people they're on 0.4 or 0.45 acres, so they'd just be under the half an acre, and many, many of those people would be the ones that would be doing this for their friends, their family, their employees. I would just like to express support for some of these changes as one critical piece of the affordable housing puzzle. And I thank you for your time.
Thanks for taking the time to call in, Christina. Appreciate your comments.
And Town Board, we have no other new callers.
Is there anyone in the room who'd like to make any comment? In that case, we will move on to our topics. First up, we have bids, and we have Lisa Belchick.
We
Morning,
have 4
Lisa.
bids. We're accepting bid number EH22024, which is the Eleanor Whitmore Early Learning Center roof replacement. Ronald Webb Builder LLC was our lowest bidder for that. We're also accepting bid number EH22035, 3 Mile Harbor Stormwater Abatement Fairway Soaks Hides. Green Velvet Landscape Contractors Incorporated was our lowest bidder on that. We have bid number EH22037, the Roth Property Demolition. S&M Prompt Rubbish Removal Service Incorporated is our lowest bidder on that one. And the last bid is EH22038, T-shirts, sweatshirts, and other uniform items. All-Star Custom Apparel and Design Incorporated is going to be awarded that bid. Any questions?
Questions for Lisa?
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks
All
very
right.
much,
Enjoy
Lisa.
the rest of your day.
Have a good day. That brings us up to the 2023 tentative budget. Let me just start by saying that this is the culmination of many months of work, hard work with my fellow board members as liaisons to various departments, meeting directly with department heads and reviewing their proposed budgets. We heard a caller earlier characterize the increases as not as more significant than maybe stated in the budget message, but I'll say that my primary focus this year in the budget has been in making significant changes to wages of town employees due to a number of factors: the increased cost of housing, transportation, inflation. We decided as a board to grant a supplemental payment within the budget year to help offset some of those increased costs. And we find it necessary to raise wages significantly in order to try and stay competitive within the market. We know that there's a lot of pressure on this market for employees. It's difficult to hire and retain staff. We have a number of vacancies throughout the town, and we are working very hard to close those vacancies. I'm pleased that we've already seen some of those openings being filled very recently, and it's absolutely imperative in order to provide the services necessary and demanded by our constituents that we have fully funded departments. So with that being said, I'm going to ask Becky Hanson, our budget director, who's worked so hard on preparing this budget with me and the rest of the staff, to take us through the main points of the budget.
Thank you, and good morning. And this is my first time live before you guys in almost 2 years. I can't believe it. Thank you, Supervisor and the Town Board, for the opportunity to review the 2023 tentative budget. This is a product of a lot of time, effort, and number crunching. The supervisor was clear in his priority to increase employee salaries, and I think we've done a good job to make that happen while remaining under the 2% property tax cap. The town is fortunate that while we continue to deal with inflation in many cases, there are 2 main expenses that are lower. One is the town's contributions to the retirement system, and the other is debt service payoff in the sanitation fund. The town continues its sound financial planning and practices in this budget, which we were just again recently confirmed with a no designation financial stress level from the State Comptroller's Office. To give an example, under the state scoring system for these designations, the range to receive a no designation score is between 0 and 44.9. The town score for the last 3 years has been 1.7, which is extremely low and is an example of very little to no financial stress. In addition, as you're aware, Moody's reaffirmed the town's AAA rating in August. The town's strong tax base and continued conservative budgeting has enabled us to present this budget today. So just a quick run through the numbers that I'm sure most of you have looked at since last week. The 2023 tentative budget contains $90,363,555 of spending in the major funds, which is an increase of 5.6% over the current budget. The tax rate for residents living outside Incorporated Village will increase by 0.52%, and residents living inside the village will see a tax rate increase of 0.05%. Overall, the tax levy stays below the cap by $8,182. The town continues its practice of using a small amount of surplus and reserves, bless you, to offset property tax increases. The 2023 tentative budget utilizes approximately 4.5% of the total available surplus and reserves. At the close of 2021, the town had over $62 million in fund balances, and this budget is proposing to use $2.35 million if need be. If revenues perform well in 2023, there will not be a need to use this surplus. For example, we're finding this year that the A fund is to receive total known revenues, which we know that we are due before the end of this year. It's not an estimate, it's not something anticipated, but we know that we're due, that we are going to exceed the budgeted revenue surplus in the A fund. This is mostly due to the mortgage recording tax. The town did receive its second quarter mortgage recording tax just this morning from the county. And with that amount, it puts us over budget for 2022 by $1.5 million, with still 6 months to go remaining in our fiscal year. As stated earlier, this budget contains salary increases for all employees, whether contractual or new. The Csca salary Schedule B has been adjusted upward for all grades, not just those that were not done in the 2022 budget. The Csca schedule gives employees their contractual increase, depending if you're on the grid or off the grid, and then increases that salary amount by an additional $3,000 across the board. So the percent increase will vary by grade, naturally impacting the lower titles at a higher percentage. Overall, Csca employee salary increases will range from 5.3% to 9.4%. This is a similar salary schedule restructure that Southampton Town just did this past summer. And in order for East Hampton to remain competitive for their lower titles, it made sense for East Hampton to follow the same. The lowest title in the schedule that a town employee currently has will be formally regraded, though, from a grade 10 to a grade 12. Salary increases are also significant for non-represented employees, and this is in order to keep pace with neighboring municipalities and the private sector. The budget also grants 2022 extraordinary services pay, which is also known as merit pay under the Csca contract. And these are for employees who went above and beyond during the past year. There are 18 promotions and numerous title changes as well. The budget also includes many new positions. The Ordinance Enforcement Department is budgeted to receive another Ordinance Enforcement Officer, 2 Ordinance Enforcement Inspectors, and an additional Animal Control Officer. The Police Department has 2 additional police officers, and full-time positions have also been added to Human Resources, Human Services, Land Management, and Sanitation. We had anticipated that due to market performance in the past, the upcoming retirement bill would be considerably less. In fact, compared to 2022, our budgeted retirement costs are almost $800,000 less. We received information recently from the Comptroller's Office that the rates for 2024 are right now poised to increase less than 2%. So that's very good news. In addition, cost savings were realized with the elimination of the adult daycare program and its replacement with programs for the aging. That amount is estimated to be around $100,000. Finally, the sanitation fund will pay off debt service in 2022 that will save the town over $1 million in 2023. The main source of the debt payoff are EFC loans from 2004 and 2005. However, we are budgeting increases in health insurance. We are now looking at an 8% increase for active and retired employees. Funding continues for many of the town's local organizations, such as the Eleanor Whitmore Early Childhood Center, the Retreat, the Montauk and Springs Food Pantries, Meals on Wheels, and many others. Fiscal year 2023 will also see the completion of the town's 100% renewable energy roadmap with over $89,000 appropriated to complete that project. As an aside, I do want to mention that the town continues to work with FEMA for reimbursement for COVID-19 expenses. To date, we have tentatively been approved for a reimbursement of almost $425,000. In addition, my staff just completed yesterday another application that we are seeking another $308,000 in COVID-19 reimbursement.
Good.
There are many line items in the 2023 budget that saw little or no increase. Others are reflective of increases due to inflation or are just mandatory. The budget is a solid spending plan that continues the town's thoughtful approach to budgeting, taking many factors into consideration during its development. Revenue projections are conservative where they need to be, and expenses are realistic and appropriate. I do want to take a moment to thank the department heads, human resources, and all the staff for their cooperation during this months-long process, which we start back in June. I would like to thank in my department, Neji Valera, my principal accountant and department head for accounting and audit, and Alex Papajohn, who is our recently promoted accountant, for their crucial support as well. So the next steps will be, I've already received a few comments, tweaks from department heads, some of the board members, some of the discussion that happens today. We'll take that back, and I will be back next Tuesday to review anything that has come up between today and then, and see where we are to present the preliminary budget.
Thank you, Becky. Any questions? I know some board members probably want to make some comments as well, or requests.
I just got a quick one, and then I have a couple others. But
Okay.
You said sanitation's EFCs, that Environmental Facilities Corp, being paid back on there. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sure, I'll go. I got a couple of questions of just letting me know. You have one on, first of all, land management, you're adding another environmental tech right now.
Yes.
Specifically, that environmental tech is to assist us with overwatching and enforcement of our easements. And so that's one of the options we're looking to do. We have many scenic conservation easements that there's no enforcement. And then also for working on some of our orphan properties right now.
Right, non-CPF parcels. Yep.
Exactly. The department head by Scott Wilson's doing a great work with our land stewards, but we felt that there was another employee that was needed. So the town board could take these initiatives on these properties that don't get overseen, or these easements that get granted and sometimes get illegally overtaken.
Right. Scott really expressed the need for that new position in the budget, and one that he felt is really worthy for the additional funding. And so it's been included.
Thank you.
Also, that department received a significant increase in tree management due to the pine beetles particularly, and just other town properties that border private properties where trees may threaten private properties. We're finding that it's important to put in a budget line specifically to deal with that problem going forward. So
there were two other lines, and one of the lines in the Natural Resources Department that got increased was a line for other. It got increased by 50%. It took it from about 50 to 75. I was wondering if you just...
I believe that's for additional energy sustainability projects that Kim Shaw had asked for to put some funding in the operating budget, not just through the capital plan.
That sounds good to me.
And
Thank
probably initiatives through the committee as well.
Another one, and it's in the town board expenditure or the town council expenditure. That subcontract cost went up 135% from 160 to 377. Could you just explain?
I believe that's the formal addition of the Hopper Montauk service, not related to the South Fork Commuter Connection service. That was added this year as a budget modification, I believe. So now it's been fully appropriated for 2023.
So that's good news. So it's being budgeted for.
It's budgeted now. In the past, we were dealing with that by surplus. Initially, we had state grant money to start that project
Right, for the first year you did.
for the first year. And then subsequently, we've been paying for it, but it hasn't been a budgeted item.
Right.
I'll just keep going if you don't mind.
Sure.
In sanitation, I know, sorry.
While we're here.
Grill Becky.
In sanitation, you're adding 2 full-time positions right now.
Yes.
I think sanitation is one of the locations that we're actually having increases in our revenues because we're increasing the cost or the way that we're charging for intake of commercial or brush or other construction materials then too. I know that we went from 1 part-time to 1 full-time employee just recently, and there's other part-timers that want to work in sanitation. So I tremendously thank you and board members for doing that. I go to the dump a lot, either I got kids. I got a lot of
Recycling center.
recycling center. Thank you very much. I get mulch from there and everything. Take my leaves, my house, my parents' house, and the job that they're doing is well respected by me and I think others. So having those full-time positions would really help retain them. So I appreciate that tremendously.
Yes, the 2 of the part-timers are going to full-time. And you're correct, Councilman, that the revenues out of that fund actually, we saw last year and this year with the restructuring that you did have, gone over budget. We look like we will be on pace again this year. But it is a critical town function that requires, investing time, effort, and money. So.
Another line that you're going to see increase a lot throughout the budget right now, since I'm liaison to buildings and grounds, is the heating line. The heating lines and petroleum base, everything through fuel for lines from aquaculture to other departments are going out significantly to try to adjust for not just for inflation, but the price of fuel where we're at right now, which I think we all hope goes down. But I think it's appropriate to budget higher right now and conservatively as he did. So I think that's smart, but it is still staggering to see those percentages go up by almost 100 or 200%.
It was a hard thing to budget without having to go too much overboard, but realizing that, with the inflation again, just and the cost and not knowing when that may or may not come down, but, realizing that we are going to be spending more this year. John Rooney and Tony Littman and I, since the beginning of this year, when things really started to take off, have been maintaining contact throughout most of the year when additional funding was needed. So it's something that we've been watching very closely and realizing that going into 23, we have added monies, but again, trying to figure out where that line is without going too far over, but something that we'll be able to manage going into 23.
I think that's appropriate. I know that we've seen already $50,000 budget mods recently last week changing over. And I know I've had those discussions with them, trying to find the money to pay for these changes that were unexpected. And I think,
when the board adopted the 22,
that forced upon the town upon other illegal invasions of places.
When the town adopted the 22 budget, at the end of last year, we were right on the cusp of the inflation just exploding. So the budget being adopted when it was literally weeks before things just went the way they did. So I think if we had had a few more weeks going into that, we may have been able to make some budget adjustments at that time. But so far, we've been able to fare pretty well. Department has been closely watching their expenses as well, and really not, again, their expenses and requests have been appropriate. So.
Yeah, I think it's likely that we'll have continued volatility in the energy sector. And so we're trying to position ourselves in a middle place.
You see the inflation across the board, the bids that are coming back, a lot of these projects that we had anticipated, not really knowing where we were going to end up putting these things out to bid, whether it was something in the operating budget, it was in the adopted capital plan. So we are finding, a lot of these projects probably will take at least another year, not just for funding, but also procurement issues as well. We have so much equipment and vehicles that have just been on order for months and months and months that we really just don't know when we're going to get some of these items. So it's been a strange year.
Years,
that's for sure.
I think we ordered a couple of EVs.
2020, I guess.
We still haven't got in. I mean, I know one of the ones in the community beautification line, I want to thank the supervisor and the board members. Community beautification line is going to assist us to develop a way to maintain the streetscape in downtown Montauk that is being offset by off-street parking that we're going to institute. So it's actually budget neutral on there. I like what you did in your supervisor's budget, Peter, by adding money for public information. And one of the toughest things we have is getting people to us right now, or getting them information out there. But by adding more dedicated funding for that will only help with the communication efforts of the town board to the residents. Lastly, and then I'll go, I might chime in later. When it comes to staff employees right now and the pay wages, I think is extremely important, as you made it determined to be on par with other communities. A lot of individuals from the town of East Hampton come further west than Wayne Scott, and they drive through Southampton. Why do you want to drive through Southampton if Southampton's paying the same money to do the same job? You will lure them here because I believe the township of East Hampton is a wonderful place to work in and live in also. That's all I know where I live. And two, Kathy took on town board assisting, talking to CSCA and also department heads and finding out what some of their needs are. They're not necessarily all hidden here, but a lot of them are. And I think we still have work to do to work with our staff, to bolster our staff. You see that in the beaches lines, lifeguards. There's a lot of great things about working for the town of East Hampton, and now they're even getting paid a little bit more, which is great to hear. So,
well, Southampton Town, like I said, they did that similar structure. They added $2,000 to the base salary of their union employees. So we did more and did $3,000 on top of the contractual increase. The CSCA contract does expire at the end of 2023. So that will be an opportunity again for the board and for the union to negotiate and, possibly rework salaries again, for the benefit, it's not just benefiting the employee also benefits the town. So.
Correct. And with that, I'll reserve my time for later too.
Becky, I want to thank you for all the work that you've done and thank Peter and all of your staff. I'm new to the budget, so I want to also thank Kathy for helping me walk through some of the budgets. I was unable to read last week due to an injury, so I'll be probably sending you more email comments as I go through this.
That's fine. That time between today and the next present is time, more time to
so we
take
can
in what everyone
discuss
else
that.
has.
But a couple of things. One is what we haven't mentioned in regards to the increase in salary for our employees, besides the cost of living, is the amount of population that we've increased and the amount of additional folks needing services. It's quite dramatic. In the last number of years, is 33%.
About 28-30% increase.
So yeah, it's about 33% based on the change from the 2010 to 2020 budget census. However, I think some of us feel that may be an undercount due to the fact that the census took place in April of 2020 during the height of the pandemic. And there were not a lot of door knockers going around and checking those numbers. So we think, there may be an undercount there as well. At least anecdotally, I think everybody who's lived here for some time feels that the population's increased a great deal.
And LIPA used to do a population survey annually, and they did away with that a few years ago. So that was really the best way to try to gauge, on a year-to-year basis, your population increase. But again, they did away with that a few years ago. So we really just have to rely on the census information.
So that's also in response to something a caller had called in about this being a significant increase. However, I think if you look at the ratio of the population increase, that puts a much higher demand on town services. I don't think significant is a word that describes this budget for this year. The other thing I just would like to add, and I know it's not appropriate now, but another look at our cybersecurity concerning what just happened in the county and the vulnerabilities of all local governments, a government with this many employees. So just looking forward to some increased budgeting for cybersecurity and employee education and user education, I think would be important as well. I see that IT is under the budget director, and I don't know, this is just a question for not knowing why.
For my time, that the IT department, in addition, a number of departments are under the finance division. So it includes what you saw the chart, accounting, audit, payroll, human resources, bookkeeping, grants, purchasing, IT, tax receiver. I think that's all of them.
that are under the finance division, but a lot of those departments, as you saw, do have their own department head.
Right. Okay, thanks. The other one is for natural resources, rather than calling renewable energy projects other, if we could just, add that to their
Okay.
mission statement and actually do a line for that
I think that's valid.
as
yeah.
well. And so far, that's all I have.
So I just want to start that, I want to thank everybody for all their efforts here. And I want to say that I support the increases for the CSDA and department heads and appointed staff, elected officials, and the regulatory boards. I'm thrilled that we're bolstering the Human Resources Department. We know what a critical function that they serve. We know that currently there's 1.5, full-time equivalent staff there. Sometimes it's only, one because of demands in payroll. So it's great to see that we're going to have 3 staff members. I would like to strongly encourage my colleagues to consider making that a standalone department. It had been consolidated back in 2012, and I think it's because of the function that it performs that should be a standalone department. Talking about being the liaison to human services, I'm very familiar with the grants to outside agencies, and I'm very grateful that we're now including the Montauk Food Pantry. For the last 2 years, we've been doing that as an emergency grant, and we have been granting them $20,000. I just saw recently that it costs them $20,000 a month for groceries and for the services that they're providing. So we're in essence giving them a month's worth of operating revenue. Also, we got a late application for grants, and that was from the Neo-Political Cowgirls. I'd like us to consider having a grant to them for $5,000. They do programs with middle school age children, boys and girls, and I think that would be important. And the chart, Becky, that's in the front of the budget where we have like the cheat sheet.
Yes.
Typically that was what was in the budget. So it was a quick way to look up. Right now it's listed as requested funds. I think it would be, but I don't think we need the word requested. I don't think that's what we've done in the past. And then as far as you mentioned, and the new program that we're creating in human services, it's not my favorite title, Programs for the Aging, but what it does serve, we put $50,000 in there to be able to bring in instructors and to offer more free wellness programs. And we're adding a new program or 2 beginning next week, and I'll be talking about that in my liaison report. I will say, and I've said this before, that I'm not in favor of longevity for elected officials. While longevity pay is a retention tool for staff, this one-time annual payment that coordinates with the number of years of service. I believe that an elected official's retention is determined at the ballot box, and I do not believe that electeds should be eligible for longevity pay. I know you and I talked that there were a couple of corrections that needed to be made. There was changes need to be made to the legislative secretaries and the town board, both in the A fund and the B fund. We do need some monies in the B fund for an intern. The B fund, that intern typically helps us a great deal with special event permitting, and that's, just in the town, not in the village. And I know that I owe you language for the fund, for the
mission
town
statement,
board, right, mission statement. I did have a couple of questions in the budget, and starting with the Bureau of Administrative Adjudication, the director is listed as 40 hours at.
That's just an input.
40K.
It's just an input into Csca. I mean, it's not really a set number of hours. Like I said, that's just in our software system. We have set hours, as you see. Everyone is, 20 if you're split,
Right.
30, 35, or we did the 37.5 was a new one. So it's the director is aware that it's not 40 hours, that it's
Okay, so the salary is listed at 40, but on the expenditure chart, full-time, part-time, it's listed in part-time salaries as 41.
Because he's not considered a full-time employee, the 40, the 1,000 extra is for anticipated stipends for associates if they do get appointed.
Oh, that was my question, because it wasn't broken down in the position costing summary. There were no stipends for associate judges.
Right. I believe it's 3 under the statute, but that's what the extra $1,000 is for. We can separate that out, but that's what it's
Awesome.
for. Mhm.
I know David Buddha called in about the planning board, I believe, the way the flow chart was.
Yes.
So
I mean, we
think
can
need to
certainly
go
adjust
back
that. That's not a problem.
And then I think the planning department's flow chart also needs to be redrawn. Okay.
Yeah, we've tried to clean some of those up between last year and this year. So, it's definitely a work in progress.
And then I just had a question in the planning department, outside professional. It's in the tentative budget for 45,000. I understand that the ask was 85,000. So I was just wondering what the thought process was.
Not everybody got everything they asked for in every budget, while contending with the tax cap and other mandatory increases in addition to the employee salary increases. Something like outside professional can be addressed during the year, whether through budget modification. If there's an RFP that's actually going to go out for services, we can address it at that time, but that would be the reason.
Okay. And then the airport outside professional was increased 11% from 1 million this year to 1.11 million for 2023. Given that the year-to-date figure is 2.1 for outside professional, and I don't see us using, less legal help and assistance in 2023. I was just wondering if that was too conservative, 1.1.
It could be, but the thing with the airport fund, since there's no property tax, you do have to make up that revenue. You have to make up that expenditure on the revenue side. So whether you pull out that full amount already out of fund balance when you are really not sure if you're going to spend it without doing a budget modification during the year.
Right. But there's a challenge though, using.
It is, but that fund is a challenge, just period. Not using property tax. Like I said, do you overfund it in anticipation, or you take a step back and do a modest increase and see, throughout the year and then address through a budget modification. So I certainly understand where you're coming from. It is one of the more difficult ones to budget.
And then lastly, and David noted on this, public information, I know that Peter, you now have $10,000 in the supervisor's budget, and there's $10,000 in central printing and mailing. Because I know we'll have an effort and we want to run newspaper ads or whatnot. Is there a plan for 2023 as far as public information is concerned? We have talked in the past about doing mailings or postcards or newsletters or whatnot, and I was just is this a reflection of something that you're considering?
So I think we've all agreed that one of the challenges that we have is actually reaching the public with the information that they need to have. And we see this time and time again, even though there may be newspaper articles and we have social media platforms that we use, we have the town website. It's remarkable to me sometimes how uninformed people are about very important topics, and how they get their information is usually not from a reliable source versus information we try to put out. So it's really in recognition of that and to try and make a better effort to connect with our constituents so that they understand the various aspects of different issues that are being addressed and how we're dealing with them, and encourage that input from them as well in return.
So, I guess then my question is that enough? And does the postage correspond with, are you thinking it's just newspaper ads? Or are we thinking we're going to be doing mailings? Because if we're doing mailings, then we've got to, increase postage
So
as well.
I think that's a good question as to how we'll address that. And I think that will be, further board discussion to decide. Becky, do you want to tell us what the cap space is at this point in the budget?
It's just over $8,000.
So we don't have a lot of wiggle room right now with the existing budget as proposed. If you wanted to add more money, obviously we'd have to take it from somewhere else. But again, because of the way we budget somewhat conservatively, during the year, we find that there are some lines that fare better than others, and that we can make budget modifications and transfer, funds to address some other interests. In this case, if we decided to do a townwide mailing, which I would like to do, at least, biannually, just to let the constituents know what we're working on, because there's so much that happens here at the town board. I don't know that you could fit it on a single newsletter, even if it was small bullet points. But I think it's an important effort that we need to continue to make to reach out and educate the public as to what's going on within town. So if you think that we need more money in any particular budget line, then we'll have to take a look at where we're going to take it from. Again, this is the expression of our interests and values and things that we need to do. And if we want to put more emphasis on any particular item, then, as you know from experience throughout the year, for instance, the Hamlet studies, when we decided to take on the Hamlet studies, that wasn't a budgeted item in the year. And we find the money and we proceed. I know that there are some requests that the public may have asking us to identify as a budget line or a budget item some specific study or effort. And I would say at this point, with $8,000 of cap space, that there's not a lot of wiggle room to put it in the budget document, but that there are ways to address those interests and efforts going forward, whether it's bonding or use of surplus or budget modifications throughout the year.
Yeah, maybe we could talk about it next week.
Sure.
About how we want to use public information, how we want to communicate, especially in light of, Kate raised, our population has grown by a third. So there's a lot of new folks here that, don't understand whether it's, it's clearing or obstructions on the right of way, or we want to talk about, the affordable housing, all hands on housing efforts. I mean, there's an endless number of
I think we have to try and figure out what might be the most effective way to reach people too, because, in my experience, not everybody reads the newspaper, the local newspapers. We put out social media posts all the time. Pretty much every day we put those out with, identifying, items for the public to take notice of. How can we get better buy-in and more people to sign up for our text alerts, which give, links to whatever that topic might be, to links back to the website. So, we've done, I think, a much better job and had greater engagement since the pandemic. We saw our numbers on social media go up significantly. People start paying attention to various things, but I think knowing how best to spend those resources and direct them to be most effective is something we have to do as well before we go make a decision about how we're going to spend it. Are there any other questions for Becky or any comments board members want to make at this time?
Could you just lay out the timing we have to move forward, because there's state mandates we have to hit?
Sure. So
milestones.
between today and I'll be back next Tuesday at next Tuesday's work session to sort of regroup from today. And if there's anything else that comes up on your end or any other of the departments between today and next Tuesday, we'll address it then. Tuesday, we will walk away with an agreement on what ideally will be the preliminary budget. That is what will then be published for a notice of public hearing that will take place on November 3rd. And then the town board will adopt on November 17th, which you have to do by law by the November 20th.
Thank you.
If there's, again, anything that comes up between now and next week, just let me know, give me a call, send me an email, stop by. And I'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Becky.
Appreciate all your hard work and that of your staff to get this ready. So next up, we have proposed code changes for accessory apartments, and we have our planning director, Jeremy Samuelson, here. This is a topic that has been of great interest of mine and the board as we focused on all hands on housing this year and trying to deal with the affordable housing crisis. And one of the ways, there's no single avenue at which we can really meet this crisis. We have to address it and attack it on all fronts. And this is one of those fronts, and that is the affordable accessory apartments, detached and attached. Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Good morning. If the folks at LTV can hear me, if you're able to pull up the PowerPoint, and if you're not able to do that, then we have Ann on standby who can work that for us.
I think Ann is going to have to do that.
Okay, so maybe we'll just give Ann, I think she's listening, so maybe
I hope so. Ann, you want to come in and...
I'll send her a text.
Very good. So this is not a problem that I think we're going to build our way out of, although having additional housing units built within the town is important. We have several projects that are underway right now in the earlier stages, and I know the Housing Authority is well underway in construction of 50 apartments off of 3 Mile Harbor. We have 16 single-family home subdivision that's planned for Pantry Road at 365 Pantry Road on a 12-acre property there.
95.
395?
Yeah, 395.
What did I say?
65.
Oh,
I'll
sorry.
scare someone else.
Sorry about that. Whoever's at 365 Pantry Road, I apologize. Also on Route 114, there's another project that's planned. But again, I don't think we're going to be able to build our way out of this. There is the Community Housing Fund proposition, which is going to be up on November 8th. It's proposition number 3. We are in the process of sending out flyers and information about that so the public can be well informed about that. But the use of those funds could be used for subsidizing housing, helping people purchase existing homes through shared equity with the town. We could become partners in helping people get into their home. There's also first-time home buyers assistance as well. So I believe we have the PowerPoint up now. And Jeremy, I'll turn it back over to you to walk us through this current discussion.
All right, and let's see if we can just switch that to presentation mode down below there. Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Supervisor. I'll start off, if I may, with just sharing a couple of statistics that are pulled from other conversations that we've had before, just as context here. Councilmember Rogers had already brought forward one of these statistics, and that is our population and the trend that we've seen, in particular over the last 10 years. So if we look at total population growth between 2010 and 2020, the 10-year period, we see that the population grew roughly by a third to just over 28,000 people in town. And of course, along with that, there is a lot of question, as the supervisor indicated, about how precise a number that is. It nonetheless remains our best planning tool for how we need to scale programs, infrastructure, services, including affordable housing. So the short conclusion there is that the context has changed, right? The need has continued to grow, and we need to make sure that we are scaling our response to those needs accordingly. In a nutshell, what we're really talking about is the core functionality of a community. If we don't have the ability, as was discussed earlier today, to staff critical town services, to have people that are able to just open the shop, both in the private sector and as a municipal enterprise, then we're not open for business. And so I think we've all seen the stresses of this over time. And as the supervisor indicated, there will be many ways in which we acknowledge and address or attempt to address this critical housing shortage that we have. This is a tool. And what I'm here to talk to you about today is specific to accessory affordable apartments. I'll get more into it later, but we currently have a program that since 2016 in this town has allowed for 100 units to be created that meet very specific criteria and are spread throughout the town, with 20 in each school district. So that's the context of the conversation that we're having today, is what can we do with that specific aspect of our affordable housing programs within the town to make sure that the units that are already called for can be filled and address the need for growth within that program to get from 100 allowable units that's currently on the books today to potentially as many as 200 units total. So going back to the need for a moment, just a couple of reminders about interesting numbers that have been shared with you previously in earlier versions of affordable housing conversations. Between the period of 2010 to 2020, there were approximately 600 new housing units that were created in East Hampton town. Of that, they have followed the traditional trend over the last several decades, meaning that roughly 60% of those units have been for seasonal use, often for luxury homes, meaning that a maximum of about 40% have been occupied or been available for occupation on a year-round basis. Since the early 1980s, when the town really began to look seriously at affordable housing needs in our community, we have created just over 600 units of housing. That's across all variety of programs, public-private partnerships built by the town, ownership, rental, you name it. When you put it all together, that gets you to that just over 600 number, and that is roughly about a hair under 3% of our total building stock. Within the town of East Hampton right now, and again, this is according to the last census from 2020 and the updates in the American Community Survey that have accompanied that, we know that 25% of all town households can be classified as severe housing problem households. And what that means, sort of an awkward, clunky term, but it's a very specific term that the federal government uses to identify households where 50% or more of their income is going to pay for housing. That can be for rentals or for ownership. So at least 25% of our neighbors report that they're paying more than 50% of their income, 50% or more, I should say, towards housing. We also know, based on those same data sets, that more than 33%, or a third of the mortgage holders in our town, pay greater than 35% of their income. So 35% is actually a hair above the standard that we look for. So nationally, again, federal government offers us guidance in terms of what an appropriate amount of a family's household income is appropriate to dedicate to housing, and they set that at roughly a third. And what we know is that more than a third of mortgage holders in East Hampton town are paying more than 35% of their household income just to keep a roof over their head. In addition, we know that more than 70% of renters in our town are paying more than 35% of their income. So within this context, we know that we have a pressing need. We hear it from employers. We hear it around the water cooler. We hear it from family. We see it in schools. It prompts the need for services like the hopper. All of these are the tools with which we're attempting to address this. And unless and until we actually are able to make meaningful progress on this, we will continue to see these trends exacerbated, including the last one that's listed here, which is that we are seeing fewer young adults and families as a percentage of our population overall. So put another way, our population is getting older. We have a population average age in East Hampton that's, I think, something like 46 plus years old. That is older than the national average. It is older than the New York State average. It is older than the Suffolk County average.
You're calling me average.
There you go.
Jeremy, you also shared a statistic with me that government employees, municipal employees, has gone down in the last 5 years. It was like 15% of the population down to 12% of the population.
Exactly. So when people come seeking the services of the town. You want a building permit, you need guidance, you need an officer to show up at your house. You need to, benefit from the services that Carol and her team offer through the clerk's office. We are literally at a stress point in terms of just being able to have the people there that provide the core services, right? So all of the things that you have talked about today are manifest in these numbers. And so we're bringing forward a series of ideas that we hope you'll discuss that can help us with what we know is one of the big fulcrums upon which this challenge can be levered towards a success here. And what I mean by that is actually solving people's needs for housing. When we talk to people both through formal surveys and through anecdotal conversation, and we ask them what the greatest challenges are that they're facing in terms of continuing to be members of our community, housing is always the top of the list.
Yeah,
So-
and one more statistic that I would like to see is the amount that housing has gone up, single family housing has gone up in the last 10 years. I certainly know with my own house in the last 8 years, it's more than doubled in price. So
Talking about like the median house price. And
yes,
that-
and what's happened to that in our community exactly?
Yeah, we can certainly share those numbers. So the goal of our conversation today, and next slide, please, is, and more broadly as part of All Hands on Housing, is we want to think about how do we adjust existing programs so that we are actually incentivizing the creation of a limited number of accessory affordable apartments. That's the subset we're here to talk about today. So basically, more simply, how do we create affordable housing? But also critical to this conversation is how do we make housing affordable? And I'll talk more about that in a minute, the distinction there. So the relevant code sections to the conversation we're having today are, actually, I think you're a little ahead of me there. If you can go, there's a slide that looks like this, has 255 at the top. Yep, there you go. So 255-120 and 255-1163 are two sections of the code that very specifically speak to what is currently allowed for affordable accessory apartments. And the last time that this got a look was in 2016. I think many of us were there for that conversation, and we had a lot of ideas and we had concerns, and we wanted to make sure that whatever code got brought forward wasn't going to be something where we were trying to put the genie back in the bottle eventually. So there was a limited program that was rolled out throughout the town that allowed for the creation of up to 100 affordable accessory apartments. And it was very specific language, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But the way it broke down was by school district. And so the rationale at the time was to say, let's essentially try this as a pilot program. And within each of the 5 school districts in town, there was an allowance for up to 20 units within each school district. 5 school districts, you get the total of 100. One of the very specific proposals that we'll talk about in a moment is growing that number from 100 to 200. So of the units that were allowed to be created back in 2016, we have actually seen at this point that only 43 of the possible 100 have actually been utilized in accordance with the law, where somebody comes in, shares their plans, gets a permit, does the right application, and then rents the apartment on an affordable basis that meets the criteria that's spelled out in the code. So we've asked ourselves and done a bunch of interviewing and talking and thinking about, well, if there's such a need here and we have this program, why did all 100 not just very quickly get filled? And much of the feedback that we got was that there are significant challenges to the way that this program is laid out right now. In other words, we don't yet have the dials adjusted on the specific requirements of the program tuned in enough, if you will, to allow people to actually fully see themselves in this program and benefit from it. So I think it is incumbent upon us as policymakers and technocrats, frankly, to think about what those challenges are, understand them, and then talk to people enough so that we can figure out, well, if we made some adjustments to those specific requirements, what would those adjustments be, and what would be the backstops that would be put in place to make sure that, you know, we're comfortable with where this program goes from here. So the breakdown of units per school district at this point, those 43 units that I described to you, Only East Hampton, so East Hampton School District, which for folks who don't have the map right in their head, includes Northwest and what we would think of as the area surrounding the village. So the feeder that goes straight into John Marshall and to the middle school, that school district is the only one of the 5 where all 20 units have actually been fully let here. So they're maxed out. If somebody came walking into 300 Panago Place now and wanted to apply for a permit within that school district, we would be required to actually reject them at this point because the allowance has been met. By contrast, the next highest number is in Springs, and that has 15 of their 20 that have been permitted since 2016. Next is Montauk, which has done 6. Amagansett has done 2. And Wayne-Scott had 1, but it was determined that it no longer met the requirements for the program, so they actually have 0 in Wayne-Scott right now. When you do the math on that, you actually get to a total of 43 units. Interestingly, and this will sort of fit in to the comments here in a moment, out of that 43, 10 of those units are detached from the principal structure. So think of something if you had a detached garage on a property and you were putting an apartment over it, think of that as the detached category or similar types of construction. So literally not attached to the main house. Only 10 of those 43 units are detached, and the balance 33 units are actually included in the principal structure. Okay. So the challenges here that we identified through many conversations, a lot of research, a lot of reaching out to people, basically asking the question, what's keeping you from doing this, or what was a challenge when you chose to do this? They really fell neatly into 3 different categories. And the first one was the application and annual renewal process. So we have some specific recommendations to that. The next one was the actual requirements of the program or the code in terms of either square footage or number of bedrooms. And we'll talk about some of those things in a moment as well. And the other one was the income opportunity that's attached to having a unit like this on your property. So a few moments ago, I used the phrase something like making housing affordable, not just creating affordable housing. And so I think, have to think of this as an equation that has inputs on both sides, right? And what I mean by that is, there are people who step forward and say, I need to, find an affordable place to live, right? So they're essentially the person who's going out to the market and looking for this service, this opportunity to find an affordable home. Of course, on the other side of that is the input to this same equation that says, here's how we create units and how we monetize them, and therefore what the price for a unit is. And frankly, one of the broad observations for this particular program is that the numbers don't work for a homeowner. And what I mean by that is, if you have a home and you meet the criteria and you say, okay, I can actually do this, whether it's under the code as it exists today or where we go from here, there are very specific limits that are spelled out in the code about what the maximum rent is that you can charge. And that's as it should be, right? We need to define what that max rent is. But my analogy before about tuning the dials on this thing has the maximum rent that can be charged here at $1,865. And so you'll see in some of what we're proposing here that we propose to bring that up a little bit, and we can talk more about that. But the notion that I'm asking you to focus on as a broad observation about why people are struggling with this program is people are not sufficiently incentivized as a homeowner to create a unit and go through this program, meaning that they can yield $1,865 worth of monthly income. It doesn't provide them with a meaningful enough offset to the exorbitant cost of housing out here that it makes it worth their while. And the exception that we see to that is when it is a direct relative. These are historically referred to as, in-law flats or something along those lines. And within that context, we see that a huge percentage of the permits that have been actually filled since 2016 meet exactly that criteria. It's a family member. We had the caller earlier who was saying, we may want to do this for our kids in the future. We may need to do this for a relative who's getting older, a parent or an in-law or something. That is the context within which we see this program being filled at this point. What we know is people are willing to do that and accept that monthly rent of $1,800 when it's a relative, or do it for less than that or for free when it's a relative. But the math just doesn't work if you're trying to do this, and we'll get into this a little bit more in a minute, if you're trying to do this as a way to help offset some of the exorbitant cost of housing as we see it now. So in terms of the very specific possible amendments that are being recommended here, so thank you. If we look at first of all, the total number of permits that are allowed here, I described a moment ago that going back to 2016, there was 100 units that were allowed. We would propose as part of this conversation, to see that total number go to 200 units. And what that would mean is that the 20 that is allowed in each of the 5 school districts within town would get doubled to allow a maximum of 40 within each school district. So that's how we get to the number of 200. In addition, we would propose an increase on the maximum rent that is determined through something called fair market rent. This is, an equation that basically gets tied into the Sony May numbers. So this is, state of New York, it tracks the cost of housing throughout the state and then breaks it out by region. And they have a specific set of numbers that get assigned to Long Island for what those average rents are. We have always in our code acknowledging that this is a more expensive place to live and to buy a house. We have pegged that to not just 100% of that number, but historically in our code, we have pointed to 110% of that number. And that's exactly how we get to this 1,865 number that I was talking to you about before. So one of the specific ideas that's on the table for your consideration here is we would adjust that percentage from 110% of that state number to 130%. And I have a chart a little later that shows what the impact of that could be. In addition, one of the things that we've heard a lot about, and we actually heard it on the call this morning, is what's the minimum lot area that's required to do a detached unit. So as you think about this program, I'll ask you to just kind of have 2 columns, if you will, where you're thinking about addressing people's needs. One is attached, and that's literally included in the principal structure here. You could be taking a piece of what already exists and adjusting the layout within it, putting up a wall, whatever the necessary pieces are to meet the standards that are called out in the code. Those are attached. And alternatively, we have detached. So one of the governors or restrictions on the use of detached accessory units at this point is the size of the lot that all of this happens on. So if your lot is less than 3/4 of an acre, you cannot do a detached under the current code. And so we would actually propose to have that be pulled back to a 1/2 acre, exactly the same comment that the caller made earlier.
So on that point, I was going to say, instead of 1/2 acre, use the square footage and make it 20,000 instead of a true 1/2 acre, because our zoning code is based on, B zoning at 20,000 square feet and, A zoning at 40,000 square feet, et cetera. Just a suggestion.
Understood and agreed. That makes perfect sense. Makes it more user-friendly. So the next one that we have for consideration here is increasing the number of allowed bedrooms from 1 to 2. So currently in the code, you could do a studio or you could do a 1-bedroom. And what we have found is that, we have a huge percentage of our population that, at some point wants to be able to stick around, maybe have a partner, maybe have a kid, start a family, and they're immediately sort of boxed out based on safety standards once you get to needing that 2nd bedroom from being able to have everybody in the 1-bedroom, and that's under state code. So one of the recommendations here is that within the square footages, if somebody wants to create a 2-bedroom unit, then that's something that should be able to be considered under the code. In addition, we would propose to increase the maximum size for a detached apartment to 900 square feet. Currently, it's capped at 600 square feet. So just a broad number here for you. any apartment that is created under this program, whether it's attached or detached, it has a minimum square footage that is attached to it and a maximum square footage that is attached to it. So the minimum square footage is actually 300. And the maximum at this point is 600. And we would propose for the detached to be able to take that up to 900. We've heard a lot of feedback from people who actually had a detached structure on their property where they wanted to do this. And in order to comply with the code, they had to put up a false wall, for example, and just have completely non-usable space so that it was basically dead space within a structure that already exists and is conditioned, but it simply just wasn't accessible or allowable for them to occupy or use that existing space. And that felt like a lost opportunity for us, especially if what we're trying to do is think about how do we create accommodation for more people. So use the space that we already have was one of the guiding principles here. And when we talked to people and talked about where's that break point, where did people keep sort of falling off the table, as it were, and having to put up those types of walls that I was just describing a moment ago, it was between 600 and 900 square feet. So we said, okay, it seems like most often if we wanted to address this particular issue, going to 900 square feet would scoop that up and cover it. Let's see, we would also propose to allow attached apartments to be 50% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling. So looking at and thinking about the attached category here, so imagine just a house on a property and you stare at it and you say, okay, how are we going to chop this up? One of the governors that has been in place here that has kept people from applying for this program is the realization that the max they could do would be 600 square feet within that structure for the accessory affordable apartment. And we've had examples of people coming forward and, same thing as I offered a moment ago, I won't use a name, but there's an employee of the town of East Hampton that within their structure had to literally create within their home a false wall to meet the 600 square feet requirement within a structure that was already built. There's no expansion here, but they were literally having to cordon off and section off a portion of this accessory apartment so that they wouldn't go over the 600 square feet. And it felt like an arbitrary standard to us, particularly for an existing building. Why not be able to benefit from that? And sometimes it's just not practical to have the use in the rest of the house, benefit from that space. You create a separate doorway, push through block or through a foundation wall. It just doesn't make sense. So why not essentially allow, looking at that same structure, to say what we're really talking about here is meeting the needs of either two individuals or two families. If the structure is what the structure is, why not allow somebody to essentially cut it in half and say, this 50% over here would be the accessible apartment and this portion over here would be the portion that's owner occupied. So, why 60-40? Why not 50-50? So next slide, please. So one thing that was in the code, and I have to admit, I scratched my head over at least part of this, was there is a restriction that prevents accessory affordable apartments from being built in the area of town that has an affordable housing overlay on it. So if you look at our zoning code, we have these overlays that we use that say, here's the type of development or use that we would like to either encourage or prohibit in a given area. So I always describe it to people as, take the zoning map and then pull a piece of cellophane over it and have that be whatever the overlay district is that applies to that area. So in this case, the AHO, the affordable housing overlay, we're not allowed to have accessory affordable housing in it. So I can't wrap my head around why that distinction was made in 2016, and I would propose that would come out of the code. Similarly, we have the Harbor Protection Overlay District. It's worth noting that if you look at maps and where we have that layer turned on in our mapping system, there are very discrete areas around town known as HPOD or Harbor Protection Overlay. The intent here obviously is to protect the groundwater, and then how that that groundwater moves into the surface water systems or the bays, the creeks, the harbors. And what is different now than when this code was adopted in 2016 is we have all come to understand the state of our water and the need to improve water quality. And then we have mobilized both in terms of technology and funding that allows that technology to come online. So in other words, the innovative alternatives, so-called septic systems that are becoming the standard now. So the way, as you all know, as board members, that we decide how are we going to protect groundwater is by saying you have to move towards these new systems. And if you get to a certain bedroom count within a house, well, then you have to upgrade your septic system. And that tipping point usually is between 4 and 5 bedrooms, right? So what we're proposing here is to actually say, why not have that same rationale and those same set of standards hold sway if somebody wants to do an affordable accessory apartment or accessory affordable? I'm aware that I keep switching those two. So forgive me, the dyslexia coming out. So if you look at the HPOD areas now and you say, how do we fulfill our responsibility to actually protect the groundwater in this area? The answer is we live up to the code that says if you're going to add bedrooms and you tip from 4 to 5, that you then need to upgrade your septic system. All of the science points to that being the right place for us to intervene. So rather than substitute the judgment of this subordinate code to some other standard, we said we have a standard that is workable and is pointing people towards upgrades here. In other words, if somebody came in and said, I'd like to add an accessory affordable apartment to my house and go from 2 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms, that does not trigger the need for an IA upgrade. If they, by contrast, were going from 4 to 5, then that would trigger. Here's the reality here is that same house in HPOD, if they weren't doing an accessory affordable, would be able to add that bedroom and we wouldn't have this prohibition in place. So we're basically attempting to take this part of the code that solves problems, we hope, and have it be living by the same rules and standards as the rest of the code. So we wanted to level the playing field, as it were. In addition, we wanted to simplify the owner using the accessory unit and renting the principal dwelling as an affordable residence. So again, we actually heard an example of this on the phone call this morning where somebody said, look, my husband and I are aging in place. We want to be able to maybe move into the smaller unit and then rent the balance of the house according to the town's own rules about what the limits would be for total maximum rent that would be allowed there. So basically, rather than the owner living in the big thing and renting out the small thing, you would just switch that around and you would still have affordable standards that would apply so that you could make sure this is a program that isn't being taken advantage of. Frankly, I can, again, without naming names, there's somebody that I think many of us know in town who, when her husband passed away several years ago, saw this as this exact program as an opportunity to have somebody else in the house, bring in a little bit of income, actually use the square footage of the house. And this exact situation came into question where it was, well, at this point in my life, I don't really need the big thing. Could I switch it over, so that this person who has, is younger, has more stuff, more needs at this point, maybe wants to have a partner at some point. Could we switch it so that that person could benefit from the big portion of the house and the small portion? And the answer actually under the existing code is yes, but it's an onerous process. So, doing the application and meeting the standards for just getting the accessory affordable apartment is a somewhat rigorous enterprise already. And then doing what I just described, meaning the owner living in the small piece and renting out the big piece, that actually has a whole additional set of standards that are applied on top of that. And again, we found out that, in much feedback and conversation with people, we essentially overshot the mark in terms of regulating this to the point where we've actually de-incentivized people from wanting to participate in this program. So again, the entirety of this conversation today is to ask ourselves, what can we do through adjustments of code to actually incentivize people to fill the number of units that are currently allowed, and with a modest increase, allow people to actually fill additional units that would be brought online. So in addition, we would propose to eliminate the year-round occupancy requirement for both the renter and the property owner. And I'm going to spend just a moment here because that's actually a pretty significant change that's proposed here, but I'd like to unpack it and explain what we actually mean by that. So right now, technically, if you decide I'd like like to participate in this program, I'd like to create a unit, you're required to be in a on-site as a full-time resident year-round. And what we know, again, with our aging population in particular, is that plenty of people have the opportunity to, go stay with a relative somewhere else, go into the city for a month or something, or, whatever their lifestyle has allowed them to do at this point. And they would actually technically not be eligible to participate in this program at this point. If they had an accessory unit within their house, they would actually not meet the owner occupancy requirement if they left. They're still a resident of East Hampton town. They may be registered to vote here. Their vehicle may be registered here. This is their principal residence, but technically, according to the code as it's written today, if they left to go for an extended vacation or something, they would be in violation of the code as it is written now. And so we actually flipped that around a little bit, and we said, well, hang on, if there's somebody who, I'll think of a different example of somebody I know goes and stays with her sister in California for a month and a half and gets out of here for the hardest part of the winter, and at her age, she's very happy to do that. She actually couldn't have somebody staying on her property through this program, renting an affordable unit, who actually would be keeping an eye on things and making sure that everything's kind of, safe and well-to-do at her property. So that actually technically is not allowed under the code. So we would propose to change that at this point and allow people that greater flexibility. The second piece of this is not just dealing with the actual owner and their occupancy, but also the renter. So I'll give you another example. This is weird because I think most of these people that I'm talking about here, which is why this is so important for all of us. But I'll use another example of a chef in one of the local restaurants here who comes into town at the end of March every year and then sticks around through the end of November every year. That's the season, and then he works like crazy, 70 hours a week all through the season, and then has saved his nickels and wants to go off to Costa Rica and do something for a couple of months. That's his lifestyle. He's technically not eligible to rent from this program. This guy's been coming to this town for 20 plus years to do this work that, at a restaurant where I guarantee you've all had a taco, right? So, why is it that this person is not eligible for the affordable housing program that we've created here because of a year-round requirement? I would argue for you in general that conceptually what we should be aiming at is to make sure that when units get created and when they get rented, they are rented for an affordable price that we can certify as being affordable. That should be the principal criteria that we care about, is making sure that these units get created in the right way, meet the right standards, and get rented for the right price that complies with the code. If somebody isn't here for January or February, God bless them, I'm jealous, right? But I think there's a certain segment of our community that actually really needs, and the businesses, David and I were at the Montauk Csca last night talking about the ballot referendum that's on for a different way of addressing affordable housing on November 8th. And what we heard very clearly, and not at all surprisingly, from the owners of hotels, motels, restaurants, gift shops, t-shirt shops, you name it, is their need for staffing goes up dramatically in the summertime. They need to be able to house people for somewhere between 4 and 8 and 10 months, right?
Stop you there, because I know we talked about this yesterday. Kathy and I were discussing this also, and that was hard for me to swallow. But after hearing it last night, I made a change in my opinion on that part, hearing from the residents on there then too. So I thank you for bringing that. I was bringing it up later because we were there's a lot going on here. You have to grapple with it all. But I heard it pretty clearly from the residents in Montauk last night what their needs for these programs are too. Please continue.
Yeah, and I think there was unanimity within the room that everybody agreed. They absolutely agree that we must be renting units like this for affordable rates that are verified by the town and meet the other criteria. Nobody is pushing back on that. What they're saying is that absent that, people are living in substandard, dangerous, overpriced housing. Right? So what we're really talking about is, people are here, but where are they living?
And if the answer is they're living in substandard illegal housing that costs too much, then I think, what we're trying to do is bring forward an alternative that allows people to have clean, safe, regulated housing that is rented at a fair price and addresses the community's needs. And if the sort of the give back that has to happen as part of this conversation is it's okay for somebody to not be a full-time year-round resident and have the apartment be let for 8 months, then I think that's something we have to think a lot about and talk about. What that does not do is take away the ability for the owner of one of these units to rent it on a year-round basis. If you want to rent it to a teacher and have that, because we know so many teachers out here who are able to actually live in the community will do the school thing during the school year, and then they'll go work 3 jobs in the summertime, lifeguarding, working at a restaurant, doing catering, working in a shop, right? Again, we can all name plenty of friends who meet exactly that criteria. So the year-round need is there, but maybe the year-round need isn't what the property owner wants, and they want to be able to do it for 5 months or 8 months or 10 months.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because one of our biggest crisis in this town, and we've all felt this, is in what you're talking about is workforce housing. And this is a good way. I know there's so many ideas on how to solve workforce housing, but this includes another option for that critical need area. For businesses.
I agree. I mean, we still have a largely seasonal based economy, and much of the work that happens is on a seasonal basis. The season for some businesses might be 8 months if it's landscaping, or 9 months, or if it's a hotel, it might be 4 months. But there's a variety of different businesses that our economy relies on that are seasonal in nature, and this has been a long-standing need. So again, I think we have to approach the housing issue across all of its many facets, whether it's year-round or seasonal. This is a great way to help do that by taking another look at our zoning code and adjusting it to reflect the reality that we face today.
Amen. So along those same lines, there's additionally a proposal to eliminate the cap on 2 residents in an affordable unit. So let's take the example of a couple who is renting a single room and then they have a kid. Right. So technically under our code now, what that means is the choice to have a kid made them homeless.
Yeah.
All right. So as a matter of equity, as a matter of trying to provide resource to the younger population within the community, if that's the crossroads you're at, we just lost our house and we can move up west or we can move out of state. We've all seen this, right? We know how so many of those decisions get made. So this is a deliberate attempt to say, okay, what can we do within the code? So one of the pieces of pushback that when we were talking about this with people was, well, then you're going to have 6 people or whatever. No, we have separate sections of the code that completely regulate what is the definition of a bedroom, how many people can safely occupy a bedroom. So if you have 2 bedrooms, then there are limits in place that talk about what the maximum occupancy can be. We don't have to address that in this section of the code. There is adequate code elsewhere that deals exactly with that.
I think you should address it in the section of the code. Redundancy is not bad here.
Say again, I
don't think redundancy isn't bad. I think you should address it here because you can have a husband and a wife, or a husband and a two partners. You can have a child, but you can't have 2 children of different sexes share a same affordable room. You would need then 3 bedrooms, but you could have 2 children of the same sex then share a bedroom, so that would be 4. I think 4 is where you should cap out of, because now you're looking at potentially 2 children in there. This is just one of my conversations. We can keep discussing this also. But I mean, I think you should have your next sentence is simplify the renewal process, simplify the code. I think, you should have it all here instead of people looking for different areas of the code for what they're looking for. Sorry.
Well, I guess to David's point, if there was a way to just describe in that process what a particular unit would be allowed to have in terms of persons, because it could vary based on the number of bedrooms, and that's that situation under the code. Just so they're made aware of it at the time that's being done, probably is going to be helpful, whether it actually has to be stated in the code or not, at least stated in the application process in a way that's clear and people understand what the maximum occupancy is.
Understood. Good notes. So the last bullet I have for you on this slide is simplify annual renewal process. So this is actually trying to get the code to match current practice. So I had a long conversation with Tom Rule about how this program is actually administered at this point. And the conclusion that I think that the town reached informally several years ago after the 2016 program was put in place is that, again, we slightly overshot the mark in terms of what it takes to do your annual renewal. The original application and then the renewal are both burdensome. So we have some very specific recommendations, and there's draft amendments that we'd be happy to share with you for your consideration. But for example, at this point, somebody coming in to renew, which you're required to do on an annual basis, very important to all of this is if you apply for one of these, building inspector is going to do a walkthrough on your place. It's going to get a look. You're going to make sure that you meet all the codes. There's a very detailed application form that has to be filled out. And then you actually have to share with the housing office. You have to share the contract that is between the owner of the property and the named leasee, and it has to disclose what the amount is, and you have to independently certify that that is actually is the full sum that's being exchanged here. So there aren't shenanigans on the side where somebody's saying, oh, and here's the cash part of it as well, or whatever. No, that violates the rule, and you are at that point you lose your ability to have this permit. But one of the areas within the code requirements as they're currently drafted, where, to use that same phrase again, I feel like we overshot the mark a little bit, was somebody coming in for an annual renewal had to complete the entire application all over again as if it was the very first time and submit all of that information, certifying that they own the house and demonstrating through a deed, and this rather long list of stuff that we already own that. That we got that from you year one. We don't need it again in year 2 and year 3 and year 4. And people cited the renewal process as one of the things that made this program feel onerous to them. So to Councilman Lisa's point, having a simplified set of instructions that using plain language describe what the standards are, and then give people a clear path to an application and ideally an approval.
You skipped fourth bullet.
Did I? Which one? All right. Eliminate residency requirement for renters. So we basically, I think, address that sort of indirectly by saying, if somebody is supposed to be, according to the letter of this, a resident before they're eligible to occupy one of these apartments. And, our question is, if somebody is able to rent you an apartment for 4 months or 6 months or 8 months, and you're coming to us from just west or Colorado or wherever, you're a resident once you occupy that space. It's unclear what the benefit of having a requirement that says somebody is a resident before they occupy that space. And I understand the intent. We want to provide local housing for local people, but we also have people who are here on a seasonal basis that desperately need housing to provide all of the services that the supervisor was ticking through before. So requiring that those people not be eligible for this program, I'm not sure actually addresses the
So
bottom
the way the housing, community housing fund legislation, the enabling legislation says work or live in the jurisdiction. So, we're talking about seasonal housing. These are people who come seasonally to work in the community. They're away. They're not a resident.
Yeah. See, the way I read it was, I'm a new teacher that wants to teach at Springs. I wouldn't, and I'm moving from, Albany. I wouldn't be able to rent one of these units because I'm not a resident here.
100%.
So I'm also looking at let me play devil's advocate on it then too. I am just coming out here for 4 months for the summer, but I'm just coming out here to go to the beach. I'm not coming out here to work. I can find an affordable apartment at a low price on, and I still meet the standard of what it is right now. If I take away that year-round residency clause, right?
I think it's a fair point. All right. And I mean, this is why we're hoping to get feedback on where we go from here. I think the overwhelming crush of people who are looking for housing in our community at this point live here, if they're lucky, and work here, and that's why they're here.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing, but I think once we start moving things down to this lot area that we're looking at, these changes, we have to make sure there's guardrails to make sure no one circumvents what our initial intent is. And I guess maybe unfortunately that's how my brain works cynically, or, either way.
Find the loophole.
Yeah, they're going to find it. Let's find it at the dais now.
Yeah.
Through discussion.
one way to address that would be proof of, employment.
Yeah. Based on.
Or letter of intent
I
from
think that's
your employer.
I think that's easy enough to ask for, to keep, what our initiatives are. Our initiatives aren't to.
Well, now that you've put it out there, that
yeah.
How many people listening?
I think it's an excellent point.
So unless
But
you're,
again, as a
you're
homeowner-
my mother that lives in Valley Stream and I want to move her out here
Well-
then she's 80.
Well, it's the same thing how we do the how you do a family permit for a parking permit. You have to show that legal connection to the family. And it's not onerous for a
As a landlord, why would I let somebody have that apartment for, $1,800 when in market, I could get $4,000 for it for the same reason,
Very good point. Yeah.
I think the income cap, the maximum income is crucial to keeping that as one of the guardrails, not the only one, but I think that seeing that that's what the rent is and trying to figure out how you cash under the half and in check and cash under the table, options like that. But people are taking big IRS risks, et cetera, for doing things like that.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're ever going to cut it out 100%, but certainly it's quite a big risk to someone to do something like that.
Next slide, please. So I referred earlier to a chart. Here's what I was talking about in terms of comparing the 110% rate that I was talking about compared to the proposed 130% rate. So on the left-hand side at the 110%, this is the maximum that somebody's allowed to charge at this point. When you do a little bit of quick math here, it boils down to $1,865 is the maximum that somebody can rent for at this point. When you annualize that, simply multiply it by 12, you get to this $22,000 number. And the reason that's significant is if you stick to that federal rule of thumb that says a household should be paying no more than 1/3 of your income for basic housing, then what that amounts to is a household income of $67,000. And so basically an individual or a couple, or a couple with a kid would basically have a household income of $67,000. And you're saying, what you're really saying by having 110% is that's the segment of the market that we're trying to address and target. And what we know is there are plenty of people in this town who either as an individual or as a couple are bringing home a household income of more than $67,000. And the reason that's important is because they're still capped under this program at that $1,865. And what that leaves out is what I was referring to earlier as making housing affordable. So if you have, a couple, both of whom are making, let's be very modest, $35,000 a year, then 1/3 of their income actually is more than that $67,000. And this is where we start to get into how are we incentivizing the creation of units? Because from the homeowner's perspective, who just took out a mortgage within the last couple of years for somewhere between $900,000 and $1.4 million, because let's admit, that's roughly where the market starts around here, you need more relief than $1,800 a month in order to make housing affordable. So this is what I was referring to earlier when I was describing needing to work the equation from both ends. We need to make sure that we're being fair on the front end of the equation for what the inputs and the maximum inputs can be in terms of maximum rent that somebody can be charged. But we also need to look at that and say, is that maximum rent actually providing relief to homeowners who otherwise would be compelled to create a unit on their property? So if we look at going to 130% of the proposed rate here, so adjusting that dial, what we would be saying is we're actually targeting households that have an income of up to just over $79,000. So let's say two individuals who are making $40,000 a year, right? And, think about, who that is in our community. Two people who are stepping forward, bringing home $40,000 a year. They could then at 130% still completely comply with this federal standard of trying to target no more than a third of income. And what you've done in the process is you've actually allowed somebody who is the owner of that property to see themselves as wanting to participate in this because it is now more worth their while. It additionally provides relief to the homeowner who is trying to make housing affordable by creating affordable housing. So I'll leave you with this last slide, which is process. Essentially, where do we go from here? We're talking about this today, obviously, at a work session. Members of the public, I think a lot of times slightly misunderstand that we talked about it here, so it's a fait accompli. And as you all know well, this is a process. We very much want and need public input and feedback on this. I've had a lot of conversations with people about the very specific ideas that are in here. People want to talk about this. They want solutions, but they also want assurances that community is going to remain intact, that neighborhoods are going to remain intact. The largest governor, I keep using that term, but governor in the sense of something that's helping us, create constraints here that exists is the total number of units. So currently, I'll remind you where we started the conversation. The town board authorized up to 100 units through, the earlier version of this program back in 2016. And I'll, underline this idea that we didn't quite have the dials adjusted correctly to allow people to fully benefit from that program. So over half of the available units have gone unused. And I think it's because, other than an immediate family member, an uncle, an aunt, a grandmother, a mother, a father, whomever, a kid coming home from college, those examples that we've heard, that's who the current program works for. And we know that the need is vastly greater than that. So the point is, through work session conversation, I want us to be able to actually pull apart some of these points and debate them a little bit. Nobody thinks we've got this exactly right based on this conversation today. I don't want it to be perceived that way. I want this to be something that the community has an opportunity to buy into and discuss, share feedback with you, share feedback with my office, and let's continue to discuss this through a work session format. When we get to a dialed in version of this that you all are comfortable with and you think best meets the needs of the community, then we would move to the public hearing phase with something that's published in advance that spells out very clearly to people what the actual changes are, not just the conceptual conversation we've had today, but the actual language. And then, of course, following that public hearing, you all would have the opportunity to vote and see if you'd like to move that into law. I know you know that. I just like to talk all of us through the process so that people have some assurance that this is not a done deal and that this is the moment to share ideas or concerns.
Thank you, Jeremy. I know from just firsthand, from personal experience and talking with members of the public and people who are faced with housing issues, that many of these proposed changes will be welcome. I know of a number of people who have family members who are looking for places to live. Their quarters are not large enough to house them. They would like to be able to have a detached cottage or convert a portion of their house to accessory apartments, but due to some of the constraints within the code now, that's not an option. Whether it be the total number limit I know folks who in East Hampton would like to be able to participate in this program, but because of the capped number of units right now, that's not an option for them. I know people who have approached me asking about the maximum square footage size for attached cottage or apartment is problematic because the area in the house, for instance, if you had a basement that might be 800 or 1,000 square feet, they would have to literally cordon off and disable, a significant portion of the home that could not be used. So, these are all obstacles to people being able to achieve, housing under our current allowances. So I think all of these things, and I know you and I have talked at length about this, all of these things are really significant ways to address those obstacles. So I think, I don't know where the board members stand on the possible amendments, whether it's the reduction of the lot size for detached, how board members feel about that at this point.
I'd like some numbers. Like, I'd like to understand how many residential lots qualify now that are 3/4 of an acre or more, and how many it adds if we go to 20,000 square feet. I'd also like to think about capping each school district at 40. I mean, it's no surprise that East Hampton maxed out at 20. It's the largest school district, right? So what are those, how many actual housing units are in each school district? Because maybe having a single number for all school districts isn't the way to go. So I just need some more numbers.
Yeah, I know that in terms of, the lot size limitations, it's currently 3/4 of an acre. There are probably more lots that would conform to that within the East Hampton School District than there are within Springs. Most of the average size of lots in Springs are probably 20,000 square feet. And that's where I'm hearing a lot of demand for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what came to mind is like when Joe and I bought our first house out here in Clearwater, we were on a builder's half acre, so we were just shy a half acre, and it was a 900 square foot house with an attached garage, which we later converted. So then we had 1,200 square feet of living space. So we also may want to have a sliding scale as far as once we figure out what the maximum square footage is, maybe you can have a larger, ADU on a larger lot, as opposed to putting, if we still own that property on Tyrone, there would be could be a 900 square foot accessory dwelling unit and a 1,200 square foot house. I don't know if that's what we're looking to do. It's two houses on the same, on a builder's half acre. So
I got a couple of questions, thoughts. Thank you, Peter, for bringing this. I know one of the things we brought this down to 3/4 of an acre 3-4 years ago, and there wasn't a significant uptick in the individuals that were applying, but it was a barometer to see how was that new legislative intent going to be seen, and what I've seen is yes, keep coming a little bit more. I hear it from some of my family members also. They're under 3/4 of an acre, maybe over a half acre. I'm on a builder's half acre also, 0.47, which is pretty typical. So I can see us moving into that. I want to look at the parking spots on a piece of property. Right now, the code allows for accessory. You need 2 parking spots, but you can only have 4 total. I got 6 in my family, so if I have myself, my 2 kids driving way too soon, and an affordable accessory apartment, I need 6 parking spots, just to fit my family. So I don't want to preclude having an accessory structure because of cars. I need to take care of my family first. Accessory affordable structure. So that's one section of that code. The size wise, I think that's wise. Kathy, that's a very good idea. Also look in the sliding scale, potentially for the size of the lot. I don't think any GFA should be aggregate greater than what's allowed on there. I also think that if this was to be extinguished by the homeowner, that a size that's over what an accessory detached structure should be removed to conform to what's allowed, which is 600 square feet. That's very similar to what an artist studio is. Let's see here. The max amount of people, I completely agree with that anecdotal story. People have a child, 25, 35, wherever it may be, and they're immediately looking to move. So looking to increase that to from 2 to potentially 3 or 4, I think is a valid look at this as we're looking at increases the sizes. The sizes, I believe, also are commensurate to what's in the code for a defined bedroom, which is 100 square feet. Okay, so if you wanted to add 100 square feet, one more bedroom to 600 square feet would be 700 square feet. You got to put a hallway potentially on to that. That could be 50. So now you're creeping up to that 800 to potentially 900 square feet. I'm not set on that, but I think it's appropriate to look at a greater size for the greater need. I think a lot of this is going to come down to enforcement also. If we're going to go with anything seasonal, because we just had this discussion yesterday, her and I, Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez and I, but then we went to Montauk and I got the seasonal. I heard the residents on there. I think we can almost use it like the rental registry. Rental registry, if you change your renter, you have to notify the agency, that being the building inspector or building department. I think that would be similar here. Okay, I have a seasonal for 5 months. They've left, they come, now it's vacant. But it also, what agency is going to go in and inspect it? I don't think once a year is enough. I think in some forms, it might be twice a year to go in there. What agency has the manpower to do so? And I don't know if it's the building department anymore. Septic, there's a chapter here, A3, 255-1163 A3. Affordable accessory apartments should not be permitted on a lot where there exists an artist studio, women boarders, home occupation, pre-existing accessory apartment, a 2-family detached dwelling, multiple dwellings. So we're looking at a lot of pre-existing non-conforming. I could see some of those being still allowed. An artist studio, I can almost see a pre-existing non-conforming property allow for an affordable structure, because that's almost de facto affordable housing. I own one. I own a pre-existing non-conforming property that has 4 small cottages, and I charge a lot less rent than we would be charging here, because that's what my family and our business entity wants to do. It's our model on it then too. But some of those locations might be the perfect location for an affordable accessory, but we can't do it right now based on what that section of the code is. I think we should look at that too.
Just before you move off of that point, so I'm glad you focused in on that particular section with some of the prohibitions that are listed in the current code. The one that jumped out at me most starkly is the home occupation.
Yeah.
I think especially in this day and age, there's a lot of people who are working from home, and depending on, how we want to define that, having somebody who, is a mental health counselor that works out of their house and, sees people who should that additional use there preclude them from also having an accessory affordable apartment.
I don't really see the nexus there, honestly, why that's there.
Well, I think that's what we're coming towards now then too. We're getting wiser and adapting to what's needs are. You're allowed 500 square feet for home occupation on there. It doesn't, that home occupation, that section of the house is probably going to be a bedroom, which is already going to go into what your flow rate is for your bedrooms based on the calculations from the health department. So you're already sizing your septic system for that potential home occupation. Now you have to size it for additional bedrooms also. I just want to go to that portion. Again, this is just discussion for the next go rounds. I need glasses. I'm right
You're at that age. Over 40.
I'm the average.
The average age.
I'm feeling really young right now.
I know. I'm like dermatologist and eyes needed. Oh man, I'm having a week. Okay.
Not like Kate's.
That's all that's true. So,
Friendly fire. I'm just sitting here.
No, they're just referring to
Your concussion and your dental issues and all.
There's a section in there of fees. I think it's $50 fee and then $500 if you're looking to make something legalized on there. I think part of this is that we're trying to legalize this. So how about we give a grace period potentially of a year, no fees, to see who might want to sign on to it. Take the $500 off, put that into a couple of new doors or a new bathroom or something to that. So we might want to look at grace period for fees. And then the last one is the septic upgrades. You're not allowed to use water quality funding to increase density. You're also not allowed to look at it if you're going from 4 to 5 bedrooms, because that's increasing density. That's how I read the code, and we might need a legalized determination on that. I would be interested in seeing what the board's thoughts would be if you are going past the threshold of your septic system from 4 to 5, which triggers upgrade to that septic system, that the water quality funding would pay for that. But if you extinguish your affordable housing unit in that house within 10 years or such, or a time frame to be determined, you would have to pay that back. I'm just trying to think of other ways to be able to make it viable then too, because
I don't know if we have flexibility on that, though.
Good point. So that's
I'm not sure legally we can allow for those funds to be initially expended.
So these are things just to look
I think looking at the extinguish issue is the most important for us, so that this isn't something that's affordable for a year or two, and then people have the ability to take it out of the affordable stock, which is something we're trying to avoid. Something we don't want to see whatsoever. I'm a little different about the size. To me, when you're talking about a half acre, 2,100 square foot, what size can a market house be now on a half acre?
Over 4,500 square feet, probably.
So if you could just come in and build for a single family 4,500 square foot house on a half acre, I don't have a problem with an additional 900 and a 1,200 square foot house. That's half the size, less than half the size of what's allowable in the market.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the square footage, the existing is 600 square feet, which is
maximum.
Right. And that's roughly the footprint of a garage. Essentially, a 2-car garage is roughly 600 square feet. And then,
apologies.
if you take that and you utilize the loft space in this second floor of that footprint, that gets you to about 900 square feet on a gable roof.
And again, that's a maximum.
And the thing is we have a lot of residences that already have these structures built, but they can't be utilized now for an affordable apartment, whereas they could immediately be converted to affordable apartments without any exterior changes at all.
Or they're being used illegally with substandard housing that we have no ability to regulate. Right. So, council member, I want to go back to something you said just a moment ago, because I think it's really important. There's our concerns that cause us to want to make sure we are regulating all of this appropriately. In parallel with that, of course, is the real world that we're living in. And as you were speaking about, what's the maximum yield or maximum, square footage that we could see on a half acre lot currently, I fear that the world we're living in is where a family is hanging on by their fingernails to try to keep that half acre lot, or it's going to flip from one generation to the next, or somebody is trying to desperately get into the market so they can live in the town where they work, right? These are all the scenarios that we're presented with. And when that half acre lot sells, what happens is, as we all know, the 1,200 square foot house gets knocked down and the 4,500 square foot house gets built. And then there's no year-round occupancy to that period, right? So that's actually a worse outcome, I would argue, than having a 1,200 square foot house that has a 900 square foot addition on it that is accommodating, the family that was there in the first place, allows somebody to maybe hang on to their home, and additionally provides them with income while simultaneously bringing an affordable regulated unit to market. I know it's not that simple, and I know people will work very hard to find ways to, game the system here. I want to acknowledge reality, but I think we also have to acknowledge the broader reality that we're living with, that you're pointing to here, which is that, adding 900 square feet in many cases, or up to 900 square feet or something like that, is going to be vastly preferable to what we're seeing instead.
Exactly.
But doing 40 units per school district, we could still see the same outcome in Amagansett and Montauk, and they don't participate, right? So going back to, I think we have to look at, how many
residential lots there are in each school district and do it as a proportion of some sort than just have absolute numbers across all the 5 school
One
districts.
size
With
fits all.
Waynescott not having any, I think it shows also where a lot of the year-round population might be then too, where they have the desire to do this. And the desire is probably, I mean, I have two post-it notes with names I have to call back after this discussion in East Hampton because they want to do it. Same situations, everything's been heard today. But you know, you have to go where pro or con, or as history and legacy goes, where the development has been and what size lots are there. There's smaller lots in the areas of Montauk and East and Springs that will want to have an affordable accessory apartment but can't do legally right now.
Unless they go through the variance process, which is really arduous. And I
They could
remember,
get turned down because I know there have been some requests recently that have been turned down by the zoning board.
yeah, in my 9 years, there was one that came before us for variance from the affordable housing, accessory apartment regulations. It was passed, but it was one.
I think it's a very good start of the conversation. I think it's something that, you know, as supervisors brought forward that we're trying to do for all hands on housing on there. We're listening out there. You know, I'm listening. He keeps saying we had this discussion yesterday. I've almost changed my mind on the certain factors. And I look forward to moving on this then too, because I think it's needed.
Any other comments before we move on? I mean, this is a discussion we're going to have to continue, obviously, and, you know, hopefully we'll hear from the public as well about this discussion and these proposals. And we'll be able to fine tune them and get them to a point where the public can speak at a public hearing about them.
Thank you all for your time and your interest in this.
Jeremy.
So that brings us up to the Suffolk County request for no parking along Flamingo Road.
That's why everyone's here today, right?
And,
Why I'm here.
and we got the ready.
This is
here ready.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty straightforward request.
Yep,
and-
let's go for it.
Great. Thank you, Jason. We just put this on. Suffolk County, we have a request from the Suffolk County DOT. The request was to add on the north side of the entrance to, I think it's Fenwick, but it's by the Playhouse, to add 750 feet of no parking going up the hill towards the water tower on the east side of no parking. They sent that in as a county road. And then the Montauk Fire Commissioners have asked for another 300 feet south of that into where there's typically a turning lane right now to also be no parking. They requested that for, that's a landing site that they have for their helicopter, and also is a place that has a lot of activity during any type of fire or other emergencies that they have to muster up for. So in that, you'll see on the screen areas in red that we're looking to see if the town board would be interested in going to a public hearing to add additional no parking on the pavement area of the east side of Edgemere and Flamingo Avenue. Per request of those two
I'm
entities.
supportive of the request and would support moving forward to a public hearing so we can hear from the general public on it. I don't know how the other board
I
members
agree.
feel.
I agree.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And I'll continue to move that forward with language to get that to a public hearing. The other one, Jason, I don't know if you have access to those ones as far as the next topic item.
That brings us up to the Highway Department request for stop signs at various locations.
Yes.
And these are, I think, all three-way stops. Is that correct?
No, there's one. There's
This one's a one.
David, can you specify which document?
Sure. It's any of the ones that have stop signs. So we can just bring up one at a time.
Okay.
Aerial maps. of
First
the
email
stop
that I
signs.
sent to you.
Gotcha.
I have 4 here.
Hans and I just finding out which way.
We're looking for aerial maps.
Gotcha. Aerial maps.
That's just the one we just did.
If you go to the first email I sent you,
One second,
Jason.
I'm forwarding him another email from the first one for the stop signs.
Thank you very much.
Lance, just don't do that. Sorry about that, everybody.
Not looking.
All right, let me just forward this over to Matt and. Should be with us momentarily.
Thank you.
Okay, it's going to be going up in a minute. It's like 1 second from Lowndes. And we are up.
Here you go.
Great, thank you very much. This was a request that came from Steve Lynch, Superintendent of the Highways, on here to add a 3-way stop sign. This will be the location of Falcon Place and Kettle Hill Road, coming off of Flamingo Road. What's been happening is a little bit of a blind corner where individuals are starting to go at a high rate of speed there. He believes for the public safety that a 3-way stop sign in there would be appropriate right now for dangers that are happening on that area because of the rate of speed in the blind corners right now. Did bring this up to the Montauk CAC last night. After a little bit of discussion and bristling, they did understand once they drive up there where those blind spots are then too. So that had been discussed. So that's one of the locations that we're looking to do. I don't know if you have any comments or concerns from board members.
I trust Steve.
Yeah.
And also, this also got sent to Chief of Police, then to all of them did.
Yep.
And
We'll have an opportunity to hear from the public on it if we schedule for a public hearing.
that's true. Thank you very much. And can we go to the next one? There is 2 locations on Richardson. I believe this is adding a one stop sign in Berry Lane where there is none there right now. That's more just a public safety issue in which there's an intersection of two streets that don't have any stop signs. So this is the one way to make it just safe that individuals know on Berry Lane that they have to stop at that
It's
intersection.
always surprising to me to find that there's a right angled intersection that doesn't have a stop sign.
Yes. So that's exactly what we're seeing, Summer.
Right.
So
Right.
in the discussion with Steve Lynch and his department, he's going to have his department start looking around all these type of intersections that have never been codified for a stop sign and give us recommendations, maybe instead of doing these piecemeal, to have a concerted effort on that. We discussed that this week also too.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially from feedback from folks who live in Springs
Yeah.
and the Springs CAC.
Yeah, and some of these just come through developments that have been out there for 50, 60 years or longer and never were installed then because it was a different place to live in that time too.
Well, this is also, all of these requests that we've gotten and complaints about the speeding in people's neighborhoods and things. It's a reflection
Especially
of
on those
how
longer
our
roads.
community has grown
Correct.
by a third in the last 10 years.
And next one, if you don't mind, Jason. This again is on Mary Street on Richardson Avenue, and this would be a location for a 3-way stop signs, 3-way stop intersection there. Again, this would be for public safety on there to try to reduce the amount of speed that's being used through there, and also give individuals on a very tight street time to stop and stop in the intersection before they make their turns or to continue through the intersection. Any questions or concerns on this one?
No.
And the last one.
It's the first.
Pulling up
We've
another.
done. Yep.
Thank you, sir. Great,
That's
thank
it.
you, sir. This is actually on Hartley, which is a former, it is a UR road site in which there are these 4-way intersections that we would put stop signs on the streets that would be crossing crossing Hartley, which would be Howard and Elvira, then to where residents have requested this, and that there's actually too much cutting of those corners there and near misses, particularly with the width of the right of way being very narrow in those locations then too.
Yeah, I support
Yeah, I do as well.
moving
I've
those to public hearing as well.
Great.
been on
Hear
that
from
street,
the
and
public.
certainly that's helpful.
Well, thank you very much. I will produce the language for that with working with the attorney's office. I don't know if I can get it turned around for Thursday, but I look forward to maybe getting this on for a public hearing in November then.
Thank you, Dave.
I thank you very much for your time.
That brings us up to liaison reports.
Okay.
Kathy, you have a report for us today?
I do. So we talked about in the budget that we've got a new program called Programs for the Aging. And, this has been, a goal of ours is to be bringing more wellness programs to, adults 60 plus prior to COVID, we had been running a program at Ashwell Hall, and we're working with them to bring programs back to Ashwell Hall as a satellite to the senior center. So we've got programs starting. It's there's 2 different classes that are going to be offered. Begins October 12th, and for October, it's October 12th and 26th, and then in November, and those are Wednesdays, and then every Wednesday in November and December. It's going to be Qigong 3, which is recuperative exercises for increasing stamina, taught by Margaret Iaconin, who comes from us from Southampton Hospital. That's at 12:30 to 1:30. And then the YMCA is actually providing an instructor at no charge to the town, and that's going to be an osteoporosis prevention and stretching class. Then that's at 2 o'clock to 2:45, and this starts on October 12th. This kind of just evolved. We finally got the dates back from Ashwell Hall when they'd be available. We're in the Human Services is in the process of developing flyers, and we'll be getting the word out on this. And then we're hoping to be able to continue programming in Ashwell Hall up until May, and then they just get too busy to be able to have us there. But it's a great program, and we're really grateful for the cooperation of the Springs Improvement Society for that, letting us have the space at no charge. The new senior center, we continue to meet with the folks, the subcontractors and in R2 architecture. We're pursuing 3 different distinct design concepts. We had a meeting about that last week, a linear approach, a courtyard approach, and then one after having the community engagement here at Town Hall. It inspired the architects to think of having a village approach, to the spaces inspired by the Town Hall complex. And then during that meeting, we agreed that Eric and the associate planning director, Eric Chance, would analyze more formally and project how many parking spaces we're going to be needing there. Right now, we're estimating 120, but we want to confirm that. Eric is also going to be working with Ray Tobias at McLean because the architects have requested a traffic study. It'll help them decide, how to design over there. And so Eric's working with Ray for a scope, and Diane Patrizio will find the funding for that study in her budget. And then yesterday, Natural Resources had a meeting with Harani, the civil engineer, on the project to discuss the septic system. So things are, full speed ahead there. I guess it was 2 Saturdays ago, we got invited to a performance by the East End Players at the Southampton Cultural Center. East End Special Players.
East End
Special Players at the Southampton Cultural Center. And I had an opportunity to attend, and they put on a tremendous little play. It was actually an excerpt of a play that they're doing in December at Bay Street. And I have to say it was the highlight of my week. It was just so joyous, and young people and adults performing. And I, never had attended one of their events before. And they are so deserving of the $15,000 grant that we give them. And it was a very uplifting experience. Just to continue on the track of community housing that we had today in our work session, the Route 114 community housing group met, and we got the results back, or we got a phone call back on the archaeological study that we had commissioned. And while we're waiting on the written report, we did hear back that they saw no evidence of artifacts or whatever. So that was good news for the project. I also have a resolution on for Thursday. We want to hire Drew Bennett to do a conditions assessment of all the structures. There's a 4-bedroom house on the property that we own, and there are 7 cottages on the property that the Sag Harbor Community Housing Trust owns. We want to see what their viability is, and to be able to maybe convert the house to the recreation space, or use some of the smaller cottages for storage, or a caretaker's cottage. So that is going to be on, and that is, at a cost for Drew Bennett not to exceed $2,250. The East Hampton Housing Authority Board of Commissioners met a couple weeks ago, and they are seeing great progress on the 3 Mile Harbor project. They're going to be taking down the house at 286 3 Mile Harbor shortly. 3 foundations are in and are ready for inspection. Building department's going over on Thursday. 2 more foundations will be going in, and they believe that the modular units will be on site by the end of November, which is a very aggressive schedule. I have received inquiries about when tenant applications are going to be available, and I assured folks that a major announcement will be made and that they should check back in May or June of 2023. The East Hampton School District's Community Housing Committee met a few weeks ago, and that in attendance were Adam Fine from Superintendent for East Hampton, Seth Turner from Amagansett, Jack Perner from Montauk, and a number of school board members, as well as State Assemblyman Fred Thiel. We discussed the referendum, proposition number 3 on the ballot. There was great interest in, the ADUs. I had sent the presentation around to everyone. A comment was made that was interesting. During COVID, we defined essential workers, and they were wondering if that kind of category could be created for when we're offering affordable housing, that we look at, that definition. And I don't know if that carries over, but it's something we could pursue. A few weeks ago, I also attended the press conference that ARF had held about the legislation that had passed both the Senate and the State Assembly regarding puppy mills. And what I'd like to do is draft a memorializing resolution in support of that legislation. And if the board is amenable, we could vote on that and, hope this month. East Hampton CAC met last night in a very cold meeting room. I'm grateful to the supervisor for getting the heat turned back on. The good news is on Floyd Street, that broken pole that's been removed. They came at midnight and Verizon took the pole down. There's still a lot of interest in the town having some type of legislation addressing invasive species, and it came up at our enforcement meeting last week, and Assistant Town Attorney David McMaster is looking into that. And I had brought today's presentation that Jeremy gave to the meeting last night, and we had a robust discussion about ADUs. Just want to let folks know that there are a lot of special events coming up this weekend. Montauk Chamber has their fall festival on Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. The trustees have their largest clam contest on Sunday from 12 to 3. And
Sorry,
get that
I'm writing it down.
Get that in your calendar. They're going to have, a live band. And as you know, last year it was packed. So you might want to get there early. They're going to have the clam chowder and clam pies and a Mr. Softy truck. The Tyler Project is going to have their annual car show at the Amagansett Fire Department. And then at 3:00, just as the trustees are wrapping up, the Tyler Project, that the cars do a procession out to Montauk and back. And we know that, because of the fall festival, that 27 is closed in front of the chamber, right in front of the green. So there's going to be a little bit of a detour. So we just ask, and the film festival is this weekend. So we just ask that people, take a deep breath, have a little patience, because there's a lot of activities happening.
Stay calm and carry on.
Exactly. And then lastly, we had gotten an application from a major motion picture production company from Columbia Pictures for a new movie. The project name is No Hard Feelings, and they're looking to shoot in Montauk. They're going to be starting on Monday, October 10th. Through, I believe it's Friday. They have a number of locations, including Salivar's. They're going to be parking at Gosman's. They're going to be spending time out at the Montauk Lighthouse, Turtle Cove, George's Lighthouse Cafe. They're gonna have, just so folks know, there's different units. There could be 3 units out on the same day. They're going to be having some driving shots. This has all been coordinated with the East Hampton Town Police Department. Lieutenant Schaefer has been the point person working with the location managers. So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up though, so that they know that there's, that's happening. I believe we got an email yesterday, it might've been from the Montauk Playhouse, where they're looking for extras. So that
I think it was the chamber,
Was it the
Montauk Chamber.
that call came out. And what we did ask of the location manager was just to give us an understanding of what kind of economic impact this has for the community. And they're just looking at rooms and the per diems for the crew. It's over $650,000. And that doesn't include, craft services, buying things locally, last minute construction, hardware issues, people running into delis, picking up coffee and whatnot. So this was, very well vetted, and we're hoping that it goes off without a hitch.
When is that?
It starts Monday, the October 10th. And goes through Friday, the 14th.
Can I get a copy? Then what I'll do is I'll send it out to the CAC.
Sure.
So they're aware.
Yeah. So that's where we're at. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much. I'll stay out of Montauk. We had the Montauk CAC last night. I want to thank Jeremy Samuelson for coming in. He gave a bullet point, talking point list of the discussion with everything for the Peconic Bay housing fund that we're looking at. That's on the referendum for November 8th. Please make sure you turn it over. And also, if you get your absentee ballot, it's on there too. So that was a good discussion. A lot of discussion then it came in, used in discussion today, which was interesting. There's a lot of crossover there then too. We actually had a nice quorum of individuals there. It was great to see everyone that was out there on that one then too. That took most of the time. Let's hear, staying out of Montauk, we did get some good news about the intersection in front of Rough Riders. We heard back from the DEC. They're approving the permitting on there.
Right.
And two, we're going to wait for that permit to come in, see if there's any small changes that they need us to make. We'll go get our final engineering, and we'll look to get that out to our contracts to install. I did talk to the representative from Rough Riders on there already about this. It looks like it might be more of a spring than a fall project based on asphalt plants, and then also for the mobilization that's needed for that project then too. Let's see here. Staying in Montauk, let everyone know we're continue moving forward on, we did some testing on the ground for the pickleball courts in Montauk that we're adding at South Erie. We look forward to getting some final engineering plans for that so we can move forward to bid and get that out. So that's still moving ahead then too. Going into another part of our recreational assets here, the construction project for the new addition of two little league ball fields at Stephen Hand's Path has started. They started the clearing on there. We are setting up for a groundbreaking there this Saturday at 2 p.m. at Stephen Hand's Path Little League. Again, it's a groundbreaking at 2 p.m. at Stephen Hand's Path Little League fields. Little League has outreach to their members to see if we can get some of the kids there. It's a project that is long coming and for the kids, and we look forward to that groundbreaking at 2 p.m. this Saturday. CPF Advisory Committee did meet. We had a discussion from Sam Klein, Natural Resources came in. The discussion was that since the new CART plan has been approved by the town board, then some of the evaluations for properties that the committee sees that the evaluations that come from the from the planning department has looked at the criteria in the CART plan as they go through their evaluation, their written evaluations. We all thought that was appropriate then too, to take that into account, the CART plan and property evaluations. On 395 Panago, not 365, but 395 Panago, we're moving forward. Surveyors out there this week. They're going to be finishing up, get survey and plan over to our engineers. We're also need to get a curb cut survey and plan there. That's moving forward also. And then we'll bring that back to the planning board for more discussion. So that's moving steadily ahead. What I would like to do is either my liaison or maybe that's the topic next week is to discuss all the other criteria of that subdivision that we need to finalize for our secret, and that might be limiting GFA on properties, accessory structures. I know we discussed this in the past, but I think we need to formalize it right now as we go forward then too, to stay on our timetable as part of the town board's all hands on housing initiatives. The Montauk Chamber of Commerce. They were working last year. I know they were working with Kathy, and then also most recently Sylvia. The chambers had a meeting with the chamber, and they're looking to spruce the hamlet up during the holiday season, and they asked for us to be able to electrify the light poles in Montauk. This would mean to be able to put plugged in lights of some type of design going forward. There is I checked with our electrician, and there is a cost to that for the amount of poles that would be done in downtown Montauk, and also by the docks. It'd be $112 a pole. That brings us to just about $9,900 in investment out there. I would say we should maybe just put it up to $10,000. I wanted to see if the board would be supportive of us. If we can try to find funds through our buildings and grounds budget, but if not, potentially unreserved surplus. But before I go there, is the board in favor of this investment into these light poles so that they can be used in the future for decorations or any type of other celebrations on there as requested?
So is it every pole, or you doing
every pole?
Looking to do it to every pole?
Every pole, yeah.
Is that a permanent receptacle that would be attached so that it's just a matter of plugging in next time?
That's correct. So instead of drilling into the pole, you'll be at the bottom of the pole where the ones in Montauk have a little hatch. There, you plug into the hatch, but to get the pigtail down there, and then also that the needed equipment. It's we can install them in house, but the material list per pole is $112 per them. And it'd be for
How long
future
would
use.
it take Barry to install? That's for this year?
That's for this year.
And how long does it take him per pole?
They said 2 to 3 weeks to do it all. This is what they were looking to do. And I don't know if that's straight through, but that's per the last email that he said was still would put us on time, for the holiday season upcoming. Seems holiday season gets earlier and earlier, but we would need to get the funding source first, procure the equipment, and then send the staff out on scheduled basis to do so. And again, it's a long-term thing. It's a one-time shot, right? And they'll be set for years to come.
Is that strictly season for the holiday seasons?
No,
It could be used for other
It
things.
could be used for other things also, but it's looking for the upcoming Christmas holiday season out there. They are looking to ways to continue the liveliness of the hamlet during the holiday season. And this is just one of the infrastructure upgrades. They have other initiatives that they're looking at also. But this will allow for not just the holiday season, but other needs that they would have out there for other celebrations potentially then too.
And the chamber uses it as a fundraising tool. So they're going to is it still going to be a snowflake?
So eventually, not this year, because they're still looking to go through that process. This year, they're looking just to wrap in garland and lights, sort of as you've seen in other hamlets of East Hampton then too, right now. But this will be infrastructure will be set a long term in place for anything that might come up.
But they're going to use it for fundraising.
That's
so
correct.
The hardware store will sponsor 5 light poles, and
that's their long term look, but it won't be for this calendar season.
And that's like a low wattage thing, right?
Yes, correct, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I support that.
Okay, so
my only concern is Barry's time.
Understood.
That maybe he obviously starts in one area, starts in downtown, and because I just got there was an issue with the YMCA, and folks have to go over there.
So I asked
as
that.
far as like setting his priorities are.
I asked also priorities of the chamber, and they want center of the village, and then we'll work out from there.
Awesome.
And I've let Barry know that also. So I appreciate those concerns because I share them too. Okay, thank you. So I'll move forward on trying to find the funding for that. Yeah, as long as the boards are supportive, I appreciate that. Tuesday, I'm hoping this Tuesday's work session. We had a meeting with John Dunn from Aquaculture to bring in Sky Tansman and I think it's Nick Cooper that discussed their project that they did as far as the living shoreline project inside 3 Mile Harbor. Sorry, aquaponic.
Mhm.
And also just how aquaculture is for this past, growing season and what they're looking to see about going forward on the work session next week. I know we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, we did
Actually
last
ran
year.
into, I think, Sky's dad at the high school. So I look forward to putting that onto the agenda for next week.
Great.
So I went through that
Great.
process. Moving on to that, on October 15th is Maritime Heritage Day. That'll be in Amagansett once again. They're looking to do that. That'd be between the life saving station, surf rider, and then also with the Marine Museum and the East Hampton Historical Society. So again, that's coming up the weekend after.
I don't think they've gotten their special event permit applications in yet, or is it not?
It's all contingent on this.
Okay.
I guess I didn't know. It was
We
just
did years past.
yes, and I'll make sure and I'll see where they're on that. But I just to give anyone advance notice on that. And also another thing on aquaculture. So we got a request for LWRP coordination. This came from the Department of State Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure. There is a request on one of the grants, and this is not a scout program. This is one of the grants that are off. This one's off of Louse Point, in which they're looking for comments on there. It's a USCG patent permit application. It's about 100 acres on there where they're looking to put oysters, clams, and scallops.
So when you say grant, you mean the land grant, underwater
land grant. Underwater land grant.
Not a financial grant.
Not a financial.
Just
That's where
sorry.
my mind
I
went.
apologize.
just to clarify that for
Yeah.
everybody.
Underwater land grant. This is for oysters, hard clams, and surf clams. And it's up for an underwater land grant. We're coordinating through aquaculture and then also through Brian Frank, who does our LWRP coordination on there. There's not too much concern on there. I will send it around to the board members for their own review.
And is that out in Gardeners Bay?
It's out in Gardeners Bay. And we have a 30-day window, which I think we have maybe about another 2 weeks, just to let you know. I don't think the town's ever seen one of these come in so far.
We haven't, to my knowledge.
Yeah,
While I've been on the board.
Yeah, there's a couple underwater grants out there. This is the first one that there's application for active use on there. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kate, do you have?
Yes, I do. First, I'd like to let folks know, particularly in Wainscott, that the South Fork Wind onshore construction is starting up again after the summer moratorium was over. They're mostly right now working in preparation on Beach Lane for their horizontal directional drilling. So folks will see some temporary clearing going on, and then some in the near future, larger vessels offshore show up, and that's what it's in relationship to. The actual HDD work is not scheduled to begin until November, but the prep work on our town roads, some of the vault work on our town roads is on back on again.
They'll also be placing an offshore buoy, right?
Yep.
A weather and wave buoy.
Yep.
To have real-time information about that. Is that going to be available to the public too, or is that just for their?
I'll check on that and see if they'll make that information like a dashboard available.
Yeah, it'd be
for
interesting
us.
to
Yeah,
know if we could get the wave heights and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll reach out to them and see how we can facilitate that with them. The energy sustainability leadership had a meeting with Craig from Sanitation because the Natural Resources procured a grant for new signage at the recycling center to help folks with how to recycle, what bin is for what. We have most of the issues that we have with things being put into the wrong bin, or trash being put into cardboard, or cardboard being put in which has the styrofoam pellets in it that now has to be removed by our staff before it can be sent off for recycling, and which costs us time. And so we're looking forward to new signage. It was really interesting. They were also offering a tour last week for everyone to go up and see how things work on Springs Fireplace Road. And I think it would be a good thing to have maybe more towards the spring, some of the staff come in and do a presentation on our recycling rules. We have a lot of trouble during the season with folks misfiling stuff that we then have to go back and take care of. And that's mainly because in different areas, there's different recycling rules. So just to let the public know how our rules operate, I'd like to have a presentation from them later in the year. They were fantastic. Everyone in sanitation was really helpful and answered all of our questions there.
Just to add on that, is that one of the reasons why we get such a high price tag for our recyclables is because it's clean.
Yes.
It's clean cardboards, clean plastics on there, because we do that. That's a great grant to win.
Yeah, that was a really good one. So we're looking at icon signs rather than just words to help folks know where to put stuff.
Tried to do at the Springs Park, the icon signs. Is that also going to be new signage in Montauk too, or just East Hampton?
I'm going to push for that. So yes, hopefully we'll be able to put those between both centers. The litter committee had a meeting this month, and they're looking at procuring a table at the Village Fall Festival for information on, think before you toss and don't trash East Hampton, and giving out paper bags that we'll get donations from for folks to pick up garbage when they see it. They're also designing a program for what we're going to call spring cleaning in spring, for a new litter informational campaign for both litter on our town roads and also on our beaches. And they'll be kicking that off in the spring. The spring CAC met, and I want to thank Katie Casey for attending and having a very lively and robust informational discussion on the new community housing legislation proposed. There was a lot of misinformation, and it was really helpful to have Katie there to let folks know exactly what that proposed, our housing plan is for that proposed 0.5% tax. The blacksmith shop will be open again, Parsons, up in the heart of Springs, for demonstrations this Saturday, and everyone's invited to attend. And lastly, quickly, I'd just like to apologize to Hugh King for being unable to attend the dedication for Loretta's garden this week. I wasn't able to attend that, and I'm sorry that I missed it.
I am as well. I was out of town and wasn't able to make that, but
There's a nice, we were there. It was a nice ceremony, and the gardens are quite beautiful, and the love of gardening and of natural, vegetation that Loretta had, and she actually would put them in the bullpen, they called it, where she would incubate native plants at home prior to bringing them into the garden. Was quite stunning to listen to, and she touched a lot of people then too.
I did see that it's on LTV.
Oh, is it?
I was recently posted, I think just yesterday, up on LTV, so I'm gonna take a look at it.
I didn't even see them there. Did you see them filming?
I mean, you can film with the camera with your iPhone now, I guess. I don't know. It was very well done, and good for her. And I think Hugh was touched. He was funny as always.
Yeah.
thank you, Kate. The Town Property Management Committee met again yesterday. The discussion ranged from Brooks Park, the Carl Fisher, Edwards House, and Boys and Girls Harbor. Brooks Park, as the board knows, there's a recommendation to hire a preservationist, Michael Devonshire. So there were questions about the scope of work that would be entailed, and whether or not he will also give a financial estimate as to what the costs would be for reconstruction of the studio and restoration of the other structures. There was some discussion, a review and discussion of the Carl Fisher license agreement. As the board knows, we've adopted a management plan, and generally they were supportive. There were a few areas that the committee had questions about, and those will be forwarded to the board by the chair of the committee. Boys and Girls Harbor, as you may know, the proposed pavilion was sent to the planning department to get comments about the siting and orientation of the structure versus the parking lot and the bathroom facilities. And they essentially supported the proposed location and siting, and made a suggestion that we simply move the pavilion somewhat further away from the parking lot, just to give a little bit more space in between, and that they also recommended that some sort of structure, split rail fence, or maybe timber curbing or of some sort be installed to prevent vehicles from traveling beyond the parking lot into the field area or the park at large. So next steps are, I think we need to finalize that plan. We'd like to see in addition to the construction of the pavilion and the bathrooms on site, that the ADA path, similar to what was done at Buckskill Park, also be installed as part of the project. I've been getting rave reviews of the Buckskill path, and we've all seen it. It's a great asset, and people are very thrilled about it. Terrific place to, have an improved pathway that will support both wheelchairs, ADA access, as well as, great place for a child to learn how to ride a bike safely on a pathway that they don't have to worry about, vehicular traffic. So we'd like to repeat that model. There've been plans are pretty far along with designating what areas of the park should have the pathway initially. One of the advantages that property has is that those pathways and roadways are already cleared and established in a dirt form due to the previous use of the property. So it's much simpler, I think, process to actually install the paths. Not going to really require any clearing of trees or maybe just a minimal amount of grading. The testing demand for COVID testing at our site has continually decreased to the point where Care One, our vendor, is looking to simply test 1 day a week, Fridays only, from I believe it's 11 to 5 on Fridays. And we may curtail that altogether depending on demand. That's the good news, I think, is that, I remember the days when it was difficult to pull into town hall because of the line of traffic waiting to be tested at our site here during the height of the pandemic. Now it's just a trickle of people. And the need for testing, getting test results has diminished as well. Airlines are no longer requiring negative tests to fly and whatnot. So there will be just 1 day a week, and I'm not sure how much longer that will even continue due to the lack of demand. The wireless master plan is moving forward. We're hoping to have a presentation from our outside consultants on the work session of November 15th, tentatively. We'll have drafts of that sent around to board members as soon as they're finalized, but that's the plan that's moving along. We've had the report of operations and the financial report for year to date on the airport through August of 2022. There's about a 23% reduction in the overall number of operations, down from the previous several years. We left 2020 out because it was an anomaly of a year. But compared to last year, operations were, there were 18,358 operations through August of this year, 23,898 in 21. That's 5,540 less operations, which is about, again, a 23% reduction. Operations for 2019 were almost identical to 2021, 23,220. So roughly a 23% reduction. And as a result, also revenues are down by nearly the same percentage, from 2.1 million to 1.6 million this year to date. So that raises some concerns in terms of, because the airport fund is non-property tax based, for receiving revenue. It relies upon leases and landing fees that we may need to be making some adjustments in order for the airport to continue to be self-sustaining. Also, news from the airport was that our bluebird population is doing very well this year. There were 82 bluebirds fledged on the property. That's the second highest total that we've had in the last 18 years, only surpassed by last year, 2021, where we had 101 bluebirds fledged. And this is likely one of the best spots in all of southern New York State for bluebirds. And bluebird is the state bird of New York. So we're very proud of the work that's been done there. Joe Gunta is the keeper of the bluebirds houses there as you drive by on Daniels Hall Road or Wainscott Northwest Road. If you look around the perimeter of the airport, you'll see the little bird boxes on posts all around the property. So that's a great job, and we love seeing the bluebirds. Last night, I had the opportunity to address our local Rotary Club, East Hampton Rotary, on the topic of the Community Housing Fund. We also had an opportunity to hand out the various informational pamphlets that we've produced for distribution, and one of which has, actually two of which have QR codes, which will take you to links to the town's community housing plan and other information about the Community Housing Fund. This referendum is again scheduled for November 8th on Election Day. It's proposition number 3, and we're trying to have everybody well educated about what this referendum means. And it was a good opportunity to speak with them. There were a lot of questions, and there seemed to be a great deal of interest and support among the Rotarians for this effort, understanding the housing pressures that are occurring now. There will also be a housing forum hosted by LTV that I'll be participating in, along with Assemblyman Fred Thiel and other electeds and community advocates. That will be this Friday at 6 p.m. LTV. It'll be televised, I believe, live. Also, the press group is also having another express session forum on housing from 12 to 2 p.m. on the 13th of October. The Hampton's International Film Festival will kick off its annual festival at the high school this Friday at 7 p.m. I don't know if tickets are still available for opening night, but there will be about 10 days worth of film showings, running the gamut from foreign films to documentaries to full feature films. And we look forward to this every year. This is the 30th year that the Hamptons International Film Festival has been in our town, and it's really become quite a annual event that is attended by folks from all over. And that's what I have for liaison reports. We also have some resolution.
So I have resolution 2022-1182, and it's a payout upon retirement for Kathy Bennett. She was in the Human Services Department, and her retirement was effective September 10th. And the gross total for her final payout is $4,774.60.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
2022-1183 is a payout upon resignation for Paula Guanga. Paula was the deputy town clerk in the town clerk's office, and her gross total of final payout is $2,698.13.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
I'd like to offer resolution 2022-1184. This is a status change from seasonal to part-time for employees in the recreation department. Retroactive September 18th, 2022 for Jorge Aranzazu and Nathan Fay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
1185 is a budget modification for community beautification, where we're bringing from part-time salaries an amount of $4,050 to a budget line for building maintenance and supplies in the same amount.
Second.
And just a discussion, this is because of the rising price of Christmas trees,
Wow.
just to let you know. Sorry, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's carried.
1186 is amend resolution 2022-28, where that resolution, Mitchell Savino was appointed to the part-time position of Harbor Master in the Marine Patrol effective January 1st, 2022, to be paid an hourly rate of $27.54. Therefore, now let it be that Mr. Savino is hereby appointed to the position of Harbor Master at the hourly rate of $30 per hour with no change in schedule or budget account retroactive to January 1st, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's carried.
And I have a 2022-1187, which is a list appointment from Provisional Senior Office Assistant for Julia Akela, and where the Suffolk County Department of Civil Service has given an examination for Senior Office Assistant, and Julia Akela is reachable on the list. Be it resolved that Julia Akela be and is hereby permanently appointed to the full-time position of Senior Office Assistant in the Planning Department with no change in salary, schedule, or budget account, effective retroactive to September 21st.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
1128 is to increase the cap for Regano LLC as environmental counsel for 2022. This is pursuant to Resolution 2022-477 for Regano LLC, who was retained to provide legal services for the town for the fiscal year 2022, whereas the fees and expenses were authorized as not to exceed $50,000. And now that the town has determined that an increase in the cap on expenditures is now needed as matters are still pending regarding the East Hampton Airport. So therefore be it resolved that said legal fees shall be paid out of appropriate budget line for the airport, outside professional, in an amount not to exceed $160,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. Resolution 1189 is a resignation from employment for Jennifer Nigro. And this is to pay her out of $527.59 for hours worked, her final week.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. 1190 is to retain LK McLean Professional Services for the Montauk Gateway Utility Undergrounding Project. And this is set forth in a proposal dated August 11th, 2022, at a cost not to exceed $8,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. 1191 is to approve a license agreement for a pollinator garden. This is resolved that the town board hereby authorizes an agreement with Change Hampton to install and maintain a pollinator garden at Town Hall Campus, 159 Panago Road, for an initial term ending 12/31/2024 with an option for renewal. And this is resolved that town board, in consideration of Change Hampton providing such services, shall pay a sum not to exceed the actual costs of insurance as required by the town for this project at a cost not to exceed $3,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. Are there any other matters to bring before the board or any other resolutions?
No. I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss leases, license agreements, personnel, including an interview at 2:30.
And we have CPF land acquisition.
CP and CPF.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. The interview in person, I believe.
It's, yeah, he may be here. I saw somebody in a suit come by, but maybe not. But he's 2:30, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.